And I'm at the hour. So, welcome everyone, welcome in. Really happy to have you all here. I do genuinely appreciate you being here, especially again, shout out to that 50 streams for
Alright.
Abe, welcome in, good to have you, good to have you. Glad to see you here. Yeah, well, yeah. Hey Abe, hope you're doing well, hope you're doing well. I was saying to all of you, I'm not sure if Wild is still here, if she's gone now, but once again, thank you for stopping by, thank you for the 50 streak, I really do appreciate it. And actually, in case you are still there, I'll mention this now early in case I can catch you. But tomorrow is going to be our last read in November for Torrid Tuesdays, and there is going to be a special badge for the occasion. So if you are someone who has had or has followed the Torrid Tuesday thing and has been invested in that, do be sure to swing by tomorrow, even if you just watch the VOD normally, because there will be a special badge. And I think it's quite a nice one. I think you'll want it. So yeah, but yeah. Oh yeah, of course. Speaking of Plague, we've got to do our usual thing. Thank you, Plague, for claiming first. That's the wrong screen. Out there. Yeah, thank you for stopping by and grabbing that. You're on to number 12, which, fun fact, is my personal lucky number. I'm trying to talk more about myself, so let's mark that. Make your bets now if we're going to go into the void today. It's been a while, so maybe. Oh. Ooh. No, it looks good. There we are. I haven't been in the void for ages. I don't know why I keep saying it, really. But yeah. Anyway, but yeah. So thank you for that, Plague. I do appreciate it. Yeah, thank you all for stopping by. I do appreciate it. Both the three of you who have spoken, anyone who is here and just lurking, I always appreciate the lurkers as well. What are we doing today, though? So. Yeah. Yeah. So. No new followers since last time. No badge today, although, like I mentioned, there is the special one for tomorrow's stream, so do be there for that. I'm really I've got an idea for them, and I've decided that there are going to be collectible Torrid Tuesday badges for each different book we read. So it's going to be sort of I've got a plan for a series of them based on the same mould. So if you're invested in Torrid Tuesday, don't miss this first edition, because it will mark you as one of the original fans who was in it before it was cool. Back when there are people with 500,000 scares. I don't know what I'm talking about. Blah, words and stuff and things. Everything is happening. Yeah. So yeah. No new books. I was meant to go out and get some books today, but then I didn't. And that's the end of that story, I guess. I don't think I lost any more time today. But then I guess you wouldn't notice if you had. So who can say? Anyway, what are we doing today? Well, finishing up with the George Orwell. But before we do that, we do have some Tennyson to be working our way through as we give people a time to arrive. So, as to the Tennyson, the next bit in our little collection is, I think, quite an extended extract. So, I'm going to go right on ahead and get to that before we run out. Oh, but I should move the mic closer first. So let's do that and then we'll start. And there we are. So, like I say, quite an extended extract today, so we'll get right about it. Today's poem is an extract called From Maud. 1. Oh, let the solid ground not fail beneath my feet, before my life is found with some have found so sweet. Then let come what may, what matter if I go mad, I shall have had my day. Let the sweet heavens endure, not close and darken above me, for I am quite sure that there is one to love me. Then let come what may, to a life that has been so sad, I shall have had my day. 2. Birds in the high hall garden, when twilight was falling, Maud, 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 they were crying and calling. Where was Maud? In our wood, and I who else was with her, gathering woodland lilies, myriads blow together. Birds in our wood sang, ringing through the valleys, Maud is here, 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 in among the lilies. I kissed her slender hand, she took the kiss sedately. Maud is not 17, but she is tall and stately. I cry out to pride, who have won her favour. Our Maud was sure of heaven, if lowliness could save her. I know the way she went, home with her maiden posy. Her feet have touched the meadows and left the daisies rosy. Birds in the high hall garden, crying and calling to her. Where is Maud, Maud, Maud? One is come to woo her. Sorry about that. Look a horse at the door, and little King Charlie's snarling. Go back, my lord, across the moor. You are not her darling. 3. Go not, happy day, from the shining fields. Go not, happy day, till the maiden yields. Rosy is the west, rosy is the south. Roses are her cheeks, and a rose her mouth. When the happy yes falters from her lips, pass and blush the news. The blood.
Sokuroi has been bound to the library.
Sokuroi, thank you for following. I'm not sure if you've just joined us now for the first time, or if you've been lurking for a while, but we're doing a little bit of poetry before our main reading tonight. But thank you, welcome in, I do appreciate it so much. Roses are her cheeks, and a rose is her mouth. When the happy yes falters from her lips, pass and blush the news o'er the blowing ships. Over blowing seas, over seas at rest, pass the happy news, blush it through the west. Till the red mane dance by his red cedar tree, and the red man's babe leap beyond the sea. Blush from west to east, blush from east to west, till the west is east, blush it through the west. Rosy is the west, rosy is the south. Roses are her cheeks, and a rose her mouth. Well, welcome in. I'm glad you are interested. Ooh, a little rat. Well, I'm glad you're interested. If this is your first time, we do a little bit of poetry before each of our main readings so that people have time to arrive, have a chance to get involved. And today we'll be carrying on with a novel by George Orwell, Coming on Freya, which we'll hope to finish. But do feel free to hang around, see if you like it. I appreciate the follow. Oh yes. 4. Come into the garden, Maud, for the black bat night has flown. Come into the garden, Maud, I am here at the gate alone. And the woodbine spices are wafted abroad, and the musk of the rose is blown. For a breeze of morning moves, and the planet of love is on high, beginning to faint in the light that she loves on a bed of daffodil sky. To faint in the light of the sun she loves, to faint in his light and to die. All night have these roses heard the flute, violin, bassoon. All night has the casement jessamine stirred to the dancers dancing in tune, till a silence felt with the waking bird and a hush with the setting moon. I said to the lily, there is but one with whom she is hard to be gay. When will the dancers leave her alone? She is weary of dance and play. Now half to the setting moon are gone, and half to the rising day. Low on the sand and loud on the stone, the last wheel echoes away. I said to the rose, the brief night goes in babble and revel and wine. O young lord lover, what sighs are those for one that will never be thine? But mine, I shall swear to the rose, for ever and ever mine. And the soul of the rose went into my blood as the music clashed in the hall. And long by the garden lake I stood, for I heard your rivulet fall. From the lake to the meadow and on to the wood, our wood that is dearer than all. In the meadow your walls have left so sweet, that whenever a March wind sighs, he sets the jewel print of your feet in violets blue as your eyes. To the woody hollows in which we met, in the valleys of paradise, the slender acacia would not shake, one long milk bloom on the tree. The white like blossom fell into the lake, and the pimpernel dozed on the lea. But the rose was awake all night for your sake, knowing your promise to me. The lilies and roses were all awake, they sighed for the dawn and thee. Queen Rose of the rosebud garden of girls, come hither, the dances are done. In gloss of satin, glimmer of pearls, Queen Lily and Rose in one. Shine out, little head, sunning o'er with curls, to the flowers and be their sun. There has fallen a splendid tear from the passion flower at the gate. She is coming, my dove, my dear, she is coming, my life, my fate. The red rose cries, she is near, and the white rose weeps, she is late. The larkspur listens, I hear, and the lily whispers, I wait. She is coming, my own, my sweet, were it ever so airy a tread, my heart would hear her and beat, were it earth and an earthy bed, my dust would lose her and beat, had I lain for a century dead, would start and tremble under her feet, and blossom in purple and red. 5. Oh, that were possible, after long grief and pain, to find the arms of my true love round me once again, when I was wont to meet her in the silent woody places, by the home that gave me birth, we stood tranced in long embraces, mixed with kisses sweeter, sweeter than anything on earth. A shadow flits before me, not thou, but like to thee. Ah, Christ, that it were possible for one short hour to see the souls we loved, that they might tell us what and where they be. It leads me forth at evening, it lightly winds and steals, in the cold white road before me, when all my spirit reels, at the shouts, the league of lights, and the roaring of the wheels. Half the night I waste in sighs, often dreams I sorrow after, the delight of early skies, in a wakeful doze I sorrow, for the hand, the lips, the eyes, for the meeting of the morrow, the delight of happy laughter, the delight of low replies. 'Tis a morning pure and sweet, and a dewy splendour falls on the little flower that clings to the turrets and the walls. 'Tis a morning pure and sweet, and the light and shadow fleets. She's walking in the meadow, and the woodland echo rings. In a moment we shall meet. She is singing in the meadow, and the rivulet at her feet ripples on in a light and shadow to the ballad that she sings. Do I hear her sing as of old, my bird with the shining head, my own dove with the tender eye, but there rings on a sudden passionate cry. There is someone dying or dead, and the sullen thunder is rolled, for a tumult shakes the city, and I wake, my dream is fled. In the shuddering dawn I behold, without knowledge, without pity, by the curtains of my bed, the abiding phantom cold. Get thee hence, nor come again, mix not memory with doubt. Pass, thou death-like type of pain, pass and cease to move about. 'Tis the blot upon the brain that will show itself without. Then I rise, the eavesdrops fall, and the yellow vapours choke, the great city sounding wide, the day comes, a dull red ball, wrapped in drifts of lurid smoke on the misty river tide. Through the hubbub of the market I steal, a wasted frame. It crosses here, it crosses there. Through all the crowd confused and loud, the shadows still the same, and on my heavy eyelids my anguish hangs like shame. Alas for her that met me, that heard me softly call, came glimmering through the laurels at the quiet evenfall, in the garden by the turrets of the old memorial hall. Would the happy spirit descend from the realms of light and song, in the chamber of the street as she looks among the blest? Should I fear to greet my friend, or to say forgive the wrong, or to ask her take me sweet to the regions of thy rest? But the broad light glares and beams, and the shadow flits and fleets, and will not let me be. And I loathe the squares and streets, and the faces that one meets, hearts with no love for me. I always long to creep into some still cavern deep, there to weep and weep and weep, my whole soul out to thee. And that's the end of our extract on Orwell, from Maud, I should say, by Tennyson. Perhaps a little longer than we were supposed to go, but I enjoyed it, and I hope you did too. Let me readjust the mic for a more normal reading volume, and we'll get into things. And there we are. So, let's head over to our main screen for the night, where we'll be facing the book we have. We'll return now to Coming Up to Air by George Orwell, where we're on to the third part of the text. As we have at least one person in the chat tonight who is new to the channel, I will cover briefly the events of our previous two readings of the text, in which we have seen the life of a man by the name of George Bowling, who at a period in 1938 we see living a sort of fairly normal life in a small suburb of London in Britain, where he sort of reflects on in the first part, a sort of standard occurrence of his life, the nature of his situation, and then the second part goes over his own personal history, going from his growing up in a small town to as the son of a reasonably prosperous merchant who sort of went to sea later in life. His young love of fishing that he sort of abandoned as he grew up and never picked up and feels great regret for. He's joining the army during the First World War, I should say. His time in service, his meeting of his wife and marrying her, his finding a job as an insurance salesman, and yeah, generally the narrative has been fairly simple so far. It's just a look back over his life. But the sort of main themes have been a reflection on the loss of what was once seen as sort of certain, the ending of a society with the coming of this war, and the end of a sort of era as things change, both with the war and of course the change of modernisation, which affected him greatly, and of course the underlying fear of a new war to come, which is very significant because this novel was written in 1938 and published in 1939, so I think literally months before the Second World War broke out. But yeah, and as it is, we've just got up to, I think more or less his modern life, and that's where we're at now. So that being the case, let me have a quick swallow of water and I'll do my normal little pre-reading patter. Again, if anyone wants to fulfill a redeem that they would worry would interrupt the main story during it, do feel free to do it now. It's a good time for it. But other than that, if at any point during the text you should happen to miss something that has been read, either because I've stumbled over the words and you haven't understood me, because there's been some sort of technical error because something on your end has distracted you, do feel free to let me know and I'm happy to go back over it. Hate for anyone to miss any part of the story. If you have comments, thoughts, questions, do feel free to let me know. If they are brief, I'll probably go through them immediately, and if they would take a bit of time, I might wait until the end of a chapter to go into them, but there are fairly frequent breaks in this novel, so it shouldn't be a problem. But yeah, other than that, I think it's, all pretty good. So that being the case, without any further ado, if you are sitting comfortably, I shall begin. So, Part 3, Chapter 1. When I came home that evening, I was still in doubt as to what I'd spend my 17 quid on. Hilda said she would go to the Left Book Club meeting. It seemed that there were a chap coming down from London to lecture, though needless to say, Hilda didn't know what the lecture was going to be about. I told her I'd go with her. In a general way, I'm not much of a one for lectures, but the visions of war I'd had that morning, starting with a bomber flying over the train, had put me in a kind of thoughtful mood. After the usual argument, we got the kids to bed early and cleared off in time for the lecture, which was billed for 8 o'clock. It was a misty kind of evening, and the hall cold and not too well lighted. It's a little wooden hall with a tin roof. The property of some nonconformist sect or other, and you can hire it for 10 bob. The usual crowd of 15 or 16 people had rolled up. On the front of the platform there were a yellow placard announcing the lecture were on the menace of fascism. This didn't altogether surprise me. Mr. Witcher, who acts as the chairman at these meetings, and who in private life is something in an architect's office, were taking the lecture around, introducing him to everyone as Mr. So-and-so, I forget his name, the well-known anti-fascist. Very much as you might call somebody the well-known pianist. The lecturer were a little chap of about 40, in a dark suit, with a bald head which he tried rather unsuccessfully to cover up with wisps of hair. Meetings of this kind never start on time. There's always a period of hanging about on the pretense that perhaps a few more people are going to turn up. It was about 8:25 when Witchett chapped on the table and did his stuff. Witchett's a mild-looking chap, with a pink, baby's bottom kind of face, that's always covered in smiles. I believe he's secretary of the local Liberal Party, and he's also on the parish council, and acts as MC at the Magic Lantern lectures for the Mothers' Union. He's what you might call a born chairman. When he tells you how delighted we all are to have Mr. So-and-so on the platform tonight, you can see that he believes it. I never look at him without thinking that he's probably a virgin. The little lecturer took out a wad of notes, chiefly newspaper cuttings, and pinned them down with his glass of water. Then he gave a quick lick at his lips and began to shoot. You ever go to lectures, public meetings and whatnot? When I go to one myself, there's always a moment during the evening when I find myself thinking the same thought. Why the hell are we doing this? Why is it that people will turn out on a winter's night for this kind of thing? I look round the hall. I was sitting in the back row. I don't ever remember going up to any kind of public meeting when I didn't sit in the back row, if I could manage it. Hilda and the others had planked themselves in front, as usual. We were rather a gloomy little hall. You know the kind of place. Pitch pine walls, corrugated iron roof, enough drafts to make you want to keep your overcoat on. A little knot of us was sitting in the line around the platform, with about 30 rows of empty chairs behind us, and the seats of all the chairs was dusty. On the platform behind the lecturer there were a huge square thing draped in dust cloths, which might have been an enormous coffin under a pool. Actually, it were a piano. At the beginning I wasn't exactly listening. The lecturer was rather a mean-looking little chap, but a good speaker, white face, very mobile mouth, and the rather grating voice that they get from constant speaking. Of course, he was pitching into Hitler and the Nazis. I wasn't particularly keen to hear what he was saying. Get the same stuff in the News Chronicle every morning. But his voice come to me as a kind of burr, burr, burr. But now and again a phrase that stuck out and caught my attention. Bestial atrocities, hideous outbursts of sadism, rubber truncheons, concentration camps, inquired as persecution of the Jews, back to the Dark Ages, European civilization, act before it is too late, indignation of all decent peoples, alliance of the democratic nations, firm stand, defense of democracy, democracy, fascism, democracy, fascism, democracy. You know the line of talk. These chaps can churn it out by the hour, just as like a gramophone. Turn the handle, press the button, it starts. Democracy, fascism, democracy. But somehow it interested me to watch him. A rather mean little man with a white face and a bald head, standing on a platform shooting out slogans. What's he doing? Quite deliberately and quite openly, he's stirring up hatred, doing his damnedest to make you hate certain foreigners, called fascists. It's a queer thing, I thought, to be known as Mr. So-and-so, the well-known anti-fascist. A queer trade, anti-fascism. This fellow, I suppose, makes his living by writing books against Hitler. What did he do before Hitler come along? And what will he do if Hitler ever disappears? Same question applies to doctors, detectives, rat catchers and so forth, of course. The grating voice went on, and another thought struck me. He means it. Not faking it at all. Feels every word he's saying. He's trying to work up hatred in the audience, but that's nothing to the hatred he feels himself. Every slogan's a gospel truth to him. If you cut him open, all you'll find inside him would be democracy, fascism, democracy. Interested to know a chap like that in private life? But does he have a private life? Or does he only go round from platform to platform, working up hatred? Perhaps even his dreams are slogans. As well as I could from the back row, I had a look at the audience. I suppose, if you come to think of it, we people who turn out on when the lights to sit in drafty halls, listen to Left Book Club lectures, and I consider that I'm entitled to the we, seeing that I've done it myself on this occasion, have a certain significance. We're the West Bletchley revolutionaries. Don't look hopeful at first sight. It struck me as I looked round the audience that only about half a dozen of them had really grasped what the lecturer was talking about, that by this time he'd be pitching into Hitler and the Nazis for over half an hour. It's always like that with meetings of this kind. Invariably, half the people come away without a notion of what it's all about. In his chair beside the table, Witcher was watching the lecturer with a delighted smile, and his face looked a little like a pink geranium. You could hear in advance of the speech he'd make as soon as the lecturer sat down. Same speech he makes at the end of the Magic Lantern lecture in Aid of Trousers for the Melanesians. Express our thanks, voicing the opinion of all of us. Most interesting, give us a lot to think about, most stimulating evening. In the front row, Miss Minns was sitting very upright, with her head cocked a little on one side, like a bird. The lecturer had taken a sheet of paper from under the tumbler, and was reading out statistics about the German suicide rate. You could see by the look of Miss Minns' long, thin neck that she wasn't feeling happy. Was this improving her mind, or wasn't it? If only she could make out what it was all about. The other two were sitting there like lumps of pudding. Next to them, a little woman with red hair was knitting a jumper. One plain, two pearl, dropped one, and knit two together. The lecturer was describing how the Nazis chop people's heads off for treason, and sometimes the executioner makes a boss shot. There was one other woman in the audience, a girl with this dark hair, one of the teachers at the council school. Unlike the others, she was really listening, sitting full with her big round eyes fixed on the lecturer, and her mouth a little bit open, drinking it all in. Just behind her, 2 old blokes from the local Labour Party were sitting. One had grey hair, cropped very short, the other had a bald head and a droopy moustache. Both wearing their overcoats, you know the type. Been in the Labour Party since the year dot. Lives given up to the movement. 20 years of being blacklisted by employers, and another 10 of badgering the council to do something about the slums. Suddenly everything's changed. The old Labour Party stuff doesn't matter any longer. Find themselves pitchforked into foreign politics. Hitler, Stalin, bombs, machine guns, rubber truncheons, Rome, Berlin Axis, Popular Front and Anti-Comintern Pact. Can't make head nor tail of it. Immediately in front of me, the local Communist Party branch was sitting. All 3 of them very young. One of them's got money and is something in the Hesperides estate company. In fact, I believe he's old Crump's nephew. Another's a clerk at one of the banks. He cashes checks for me occasionally. A nice boy with a round, very young, eager face, blue eyes like a baby, and hair so fair you'd think he peroxided it. He only looks about 17. I suppose he's 20. He wore in a cheap blue suit and a bright blue tie that went with his hair. Next to these 3, another communist was sitting. But this one, it seems, is a different kind of communist, and not quite. This is what they call a Trotskyist. The others have got a down on him. He's even younger, a very thin, very dark, nervous-looking boy. Clever face. Jew, of course. These fools taking the lecture quite differently from the others. You knew they'd be on their feet the moment question time started. You could see them kind of twitching already. And the little Trotskyist working himself from side to side, and his bum and his anxiety to get ahead of the others. I stopped listening to the actual words of the lecture, but there are more ways than one of listening. I shut my eyes for a moment. The effect of that were curious. I seemed to see the fellow much better when I could only hear his voice. It were a voice that sounded as if it could go on for a fortnight without stopping. It's a ghastly thing, really, to have a sort of human barrel organ shouting propaganda at you by the hour. The same thing over and over again. Hate, hate, hate. Let's all get together and have a good hate. Over and over. It gives you the feeling that something's got inside your skull and is hammering down on your brain. But for a moment, with my eyes shut, I managed to turn the tables on him. I got inside his skull. It was a peculiar sensation. For about a second I was inside him. You might always say I was him. At any rate, I felt what he was feeling. I saw the vision he was seeing. And it wasn't all the kind of vision that could be talked about. What he's saying is merely that Hitler's after us and we must get together and have a good hate. Doesn't go into details, leaves it all respectable. But what he's seeing is something quite different. It's a picture of himself smashing people's faces in with a spanner. Fascist faces, of course. I know that's what he was seeing. It's what I saw myself for the second or two that I was inside him. Smash right in the middle. The bones cave in like an eggshell. And what was a face a minute ago is just a great big blob of strawberry jam. Smash, there goes another. That's what's in his mind, waking and sleeping. The more he thinks it, the more he likes it. And it's okay, because the smashed faces belong to fascists. You could hear all that in the tone of his voice. But why? Likeliest explanation, because he's scared. Every thinking person nowadays is stiff with fright. This is merely a chap who's got sufficient foresight to be a little more frightened than the others. Hitler's after us. Quick, let's all grab a spanner, get together, and perhaps if we smash in enough faces, they won't smash ours. Gang up, choose your leader. Hitler's black and Stalin's white. But it just as well might be the other way round, because in the little chap's mind, both Hitler and Stalin are the same. Both mean spanners and smash faces. Hey Nesca, welcome in. If you're just coming in now, we rejoin our George Bowling as he goes to a meeting of the local leftist book club, where they're having a lecture by an anti-fascist person who's speaking against the evils of Hitler. And that's where we're at. But yeah, welcome in. Thank you for joining us. Because in the little chap's mind, both Hitler and Stalin are the same. Both mean spanners and smashed faces. War. I started thinking about it again. It's coming soon, that's certain. But who's afraid of war? That's to say, who's afraid of the bombs and the machine guns? You are, you say. Yes, I am. And so is anybody who's ever seen them. It isn't the war that matters, it's the after-war. The world we're going down into, the kind of hate world, slogan world. The coloured shirts, the barbed wire, the rubber truncheons, the secret cells where the electric light burns night and day, and the detectives watching you while you sleep. All the processions and the posters with enormous faces, and the crowds of a million people all cheering for the leader till they deafen themselves into thinking they really worship him. All the time underneath they hate him so that people they want to puke. It's all going to happen, or isn't it? Some days I know it's impossible, other days I know it's inevitable. That night at any rate, I knew it was going to happen. It was all in the sound of the little lecturer's voice. So perhaps after all there is a significance in this mingy little crowd that would turn out on a winter's light to listen to a lecture of this kind. Or at any rate in the 5 or 6 who can grasp what it's all about. They're simply the outposts of an enormous army. They're the long-sighted ones, the first rats to spot that the ship is sinking. Quick, quick. The fascists are coming. Spanners ready, boys. Smash others or they'll smash you. So terrified of the future that they're jumping straight into it like a rabbit diving down a boa constrictor's throat. What'll happen to chaps like me when we get fascism in England? The truth is it probably won't make the slightest difference. As for the lecturer and those 4 communists in the audience, yes, it'll make plenty of difference to them. They'll be smashing faces, or having their own smashed according to who's winning. But the ordinary Midland chaps like me will be carrying on just as usual. And it frightens me. I'll tell you, it frightens me. I just started to wonder why when the lecturer stopped and sat down. There's the usual odd little sound of clapping that you get when there are only about 15 people in the audience. And the old Witship said his piece, and before you could say Jack Robinson, the 4 communists was on their feet together. They had a good dogfight and went on for about 10 minutes, full of a lot of stuff that nobody else understood, such as dialectical materialism and the destiny of the proletariat, and what Lenin said in 1918. Then the lecturer, who'd had a drink of water, stood up and gave a summing up that made the Trotskyist wiggle about in his chair, and pleased the other 3, and the dogfight went on, unofficially, for a bit longer. Nobody else did any talking. Hilda and the others had cleared out the moment the lecture ended. Probably they were afraid there was going to be a collection to pay for the hour of the horn. The little woman with red hair was staying to finish her row. Or was her row, sorry. You could hear her counting the stitches in a whisper, while the others argued. And Witcher sat and beamed at whoever happened to be speaking, and you could see him thinking how interesting it all was, making mental notes. And the girl with the black hair looked from one to the other, with her mouth a little open. The old Labour man, looking rather like a seal with his droopy moustache and his overcoat up to his ears, sat looking up at them, wondering what the hell it was all about. And finally I got up and began to put on my overcoat. The dogfight had turned into a private row between the little Trotskyist and the boy with fair hair. They were arguing about whether you ought to join the army if war broke out. As I edged my way out of the row of chairs to get out, the fair-haired one appealed to me. "Mr. Bowling, look here. If war broke out and we had the chance to smash fascism once and for all, wouldn't you fight? If you were young, I mean." I suppose he thinks I'm about 60. "You bet I wouldn't," I said. "I had enough to go on with the last time. But to smash fascism? Oh, bugger fascism. There's been enough smashing done already, you ask me." The little Trotskyist chips in with a social patriotism and betrayal of the workers. But the other cuts him short. "But you're thinking of 1914. That was just an ordinary imperialist war. This time it's different. Look here. When you hear about what's going on in Germany and the concentration camps and the Nazis beating people up with rubber truncheons and making the Jews spit in each other's faces, does it make your blood boil? They're always going on about your blood boiling. Just the same phrase during the war, I remember. I went off the boil in 1916, I told him. And so are you, when you know what the trench smells like." And all of a sudden I seemed to see him. It was as if I hadn't properly seen him till that very moment. A very young, eager face, might have belonged to a good-looking schoolboy, with blue eyes and towel-coloured hair, gazing into mine. And for a moment, actually, he'd got tears in his eyes. Quite as strongly as all that about the German Jews. As a matter of fact, I knew just what it felt like. He's an hefty lad, probably plays rugby for the bank. Got brains too. And here he is, blank clerk, in godless suburb, sitting behind the frosted windows, entering figures into a ledger. Counting piles of notes, bum-sucking to the manager, feels his life rotting away. And all the while over in Europe, the big stuff is happening. Shells bursting over the trenches and waves of infantry charging through the drifts of smoke. Probably some of his pals are in Spain fighting. Of course he's spoiling for a war. How can you blame him? For a moment I had a peculiar feeling that he was my son, which in point of years he might have been. And I thought of that sweltering hot day in August, when the newsboy stuck up a poster, "England declares war on Germany," and we all rushed out onto the pavement in our white aprons and cheered. "Listen, son," I said, "you got it all wrong. In 1914 we thought it was going to be a glorious business. It wasn't. It was just a bloody mess. If it comes again, you keep out of it. Why should you get your body plugged full of lead? Keep it with some girl. You think war's all heroism and VC charges, but I tell you it isn't like that. You don't have bayonet charges nowadays, and when you do it isn't like you imagined. You don't feel like an hero. All you know is that you have no sleep for 2 days, you sting like a polecat, you piss in your bags of fright, and your hands are so cold you can't hold your rifle. That doesn't matter a damn either. It's the things that happen afterwards. Makes no impression, of course. They just think you're out of date. Might as well stand at the door of a knocking shop handing out tracts. People were beginning to clear off. Which were taking the lecture home. The three communists and the little Jew went up the road together. They were going at it again with the proletarian solidarity and dialectic of the dialectic, and what Trotsky said in 1917. They're all the same, really. It was a damp, still, very black night. The lamps seemed to hang in darkness like stars and didn't light the road. In the distance you could hear the trains booming along the R Street. I wanted a drink, but it was nearly 10, and the nearest pub was half a mile away. Besides, I wanted someone to talk to, the way you can't talk in a pub. It's funny how my brain had been on the go all day. Partly the result of not working, of course, and partly the new false teeth, which had kind of freshened me up. All day I've been brooding on the future and the past. I wanted to talk about the bad times either coming or isn't coming, the slogans and the coloured shirts, and the streamlined men from Eastern Europe who were going to knock old England's cock hard. I was trying to talk to Hilda. Suddenly it occurred to me to go and look up old Porteous. He's a pal of mine and keeps late hours. Porteous is a retired public school master. He lives in rooms, which luckily are in the lower half of the house, in the old part of the town, near the church. He's a bachelor, of course. You can't imagine that kind of married. He lives all alone with his books and his pipe, and has a woman in to do for him. He's a learned kind of chap, with his Greek and his Latin and poetry and all that. I suppose that if the local left book club branch represented progress, old Porteous stands for culture. Neither of them cuts much ice in West Bletchley. The light was burning in the little room where old Porteous sits reading till all hours of the night. As I tapped on the front door, he came strolling out as usual, with his pipe between his teeth, and his fingers in a book to keep the place. He's rather a striking looking chap, very tall, with curly grey hair, and a thin, dreamy kind of face. He's a bit discoloured. He might always belong to a boy, though he must be nearly 60. It's funny how some of these public school and university chaps man look like boys till their dying day. There's something in their movements. Old Porteous has got a way of strolling up and down with that handsome head of his, with the grey curls held back, that makes you feel that all the while he's dreaming about some poem or other, and isn't conscious of what's going on around him. You can't look at him without seeing the way he's lived written all over him. Public school, Oxford, and back to his old school as a master. Whole life lived in an atmosphere of Latin, Greek and cricket. He's got all the mannerisms. Always wear an old Harris tweed jacket and old grey flannel bags, which he likes to call disgraceful. Smokes a pipe and looks down on cigarettes. Although he sits up after night, I bet he has a cold bath every morning. I suppose from his point of view I'm a bit of a bounder. I haven't been to a public school. I don't know any Latin and I don't even want to. He tells me sometimes that it's a pity I'm insensible to beauty, which I suppose is a polite way of saying that I've got no education. All the same, I like him. He's very hospitable in the right kind of way, and ready to have you in and talk all hours, and always got drinks handy. When you live in a house like ours, more or less infested by women and kids, it does you good to get out of it sometimes, into a bachelor atmosphere, a kind of book part fire atmosphere. And a classy Oxford feeling and nothing mattering except books and poetry and Greek statues, and nothing worth mentioning having happened since the Goths sacked Rome. Well, sometimes that's a comfort too. He shoved me into the old leather armchair by the fire and dished out whiskey and soda. I've never seen his sitting room when it wasn't dim with pipe smoke. The ceiling is almost black. It's a smallish room, except for the doors and the windows and the space over the fireplace. The walls is covered with books from the floor right up to the ceiling. On the mantelpiece there are the things you'd expect. A row of old briar pipes, all filthy. A few Greek silver coins, a tobacco jar with the arms of old Porteous's college on it, and a little earthenware lamp which he told me he dug up on some mountain in Sicily. Over the mantelpiece there are photos of Greek statues. There's a big one in the middle, of a woman with wings and no head. It looks as if she was stepping out to catch a bus. I remember how shocked old Porteous was when the first time I saw it, not knowing any better. I asked him why they didn't stick an head on it. Porteous started refilling his pipe from the jar on the mantelpiece. That intolerable woman upstairs has purchased a wireless set, he said. I had been hoping to live the rest of my life out of the sound of those things. I suppose there is nothing one can do. You happen to know any of the legal position? I told him there was nothing one could do. I rather like the Oxfordly way he says intolerable. It tickles me. In 1938, I find someone objected to having a radio in the house. Porteous was strolling up and down in his usual dreamy way, with his hands in his coat pocket and his hair between his teeth. His pipe between his teeth. Almost instantly he began talking about some law against musical instruments that were passed in Athens at the time of Pericles. It's always that way with old Porteous. All his talk is about things that happened centuries ago. Whenever you start off with it, always comes back to statues and poetry, and the Greeks and Romans. If you mention the Queen Mary, he'll start telling you about Phoenician triremes. He never reads a modern book, refuses to know their names, never looks at any newspaper except the Times, and takes a pride in telling you that he's never been to the pictures. Except for a few poets like Keats and Wordsworth, he thinks the modern world, and from his point of view the modern world is the last 2,000 years, just oughtn't to have happened. I'm part of the modern world myself, but I like to hear him talk. He'll stroll around the shelves and all out first one book, then another, and now and again he'll read you a piece between little puffs of smoke, generally having to translate it from this Latin or something. As he goes, it's all kind of peaceful, kind of mellow. Arthur. Well, I'm glad you like the Orwell, Arthur. We're most of the way through it at this point, but the VODs are still up. I think they're still on Twitch, but if they're not, they'll be on YouTube. But yeah. Thank you for stopping by. I hope you are enjoying yourself. I appreciate it. What was this? He'll stroll around the shelves and haul out first one book, then another. Now and again he'll read you a piece between little puffs of smoke, generally having to translate it from the Latin or something as he goes. He's all kind of peaceful, kind of mellow, all a little like a schoolmaster, and yet it suits you somehow. Why you listen, you aren't in the same world as trams and gas bills and insurance companies. It's all temples and olive trees and peacocks and elephants, and chaps in the arenas with their nets and tridents, and winged lions and eunuchs and galleys and catapults, and generals in brass armour galloping their horses over the soldiers' shields. It's funny that you ever cottoned on to a chap like me. It's one of the advantages of being fat that you can fit into almost any society. Besides, we meet on common ground when it comes to dirty stories. They're the one modern thing he cares about, though, as he's always reminded me, they aren't modern. He's rather old-maidish about it, always tells a story in a veiled kind of way. Sometimes he'll pick out some Latin poet and translate a smutty rhyme, leaving a lot to your imagination, or drop hints about the private lives of the Roman emperors, and the things that went on in the temples of Ashtaroth. They seem to have been a bad lot, these Greeks and Romans. Old Porteous have got photographs of wall paintings somewhere in Italy that would make your hair curl. When I'm fed up with business and home life, it's often done me a lot of good to go and have a talk with Porteous. But tonight it didn't seem to. My mum was still running the same lines as they'd been all day. Just as I'd done with the Left Book Club lecture, I didn't exactly listen to what Porteous was saying, and the sound of his voice. But whereas the lecturer's voice had got under my skin, old Porteous's didn't. They were too peaceful, too Oxfordy. Finally, when he was in the middle of saying something, I chipped in and said, "Tell me, Porteous, what do you think of Hitler?" Old Porteous was leaning in his lanky, graceful kind of way with his elbows on the mantelpiece, and a foot on the fender. He was so surprised that he almost took his pipe out of his mouth. "Hitler? This German person? My dear fellow, I don't think of him. But the trouble is he's going to bloody well make us think about him before he's finished." Old Porteous shies a bit of the word bloody, which he doesn't like. Of course it's part of his pose never to be shocked. And Ian's walking up and down again, puffing out smoke. I see no reason for paying any attention to him. A mere adventurer. These people come and go, ephemeral, purely ephemeral. I'm not certain what the word ephemeral means, but I'll stick to my point. I think you got it wrong. Old Hitler's something different. So's Joe Stalin. They aren't like those chaps in the old days who crucified people and chopped their hands off and so forth, just for the fun of it. They're after something quite new, something that's never been heard of before. Excuse me a sec, I feel like my nose is getting stuffed up and I can hear it in my voice, so I'm just gonna mute for a moment. Sorry about that. They're after something quite new, something that's never been heard of before. My dear fellow, there's nothing new under the sun. Of course, that's a favourite saying of old Porteus's. You won't hear of the existence of anything new. As soon as you tell him about anything that's happening nowadays, he said that exactly the same thing happened in the reign of King so-and-so. Even if you think up things like aeroplanes, he tells you that they probably had them in Crete or Marcinea or wherever it were. I tried to explain to him what I'd felt while the little bloke were lecturing, the kind of vision I'd had, the bad time that's coming, but he wouldn't listen. He nearly repeated that there's nothing new under the sun. Finally, he hauls a book out of the shelves and reads me a passage about some Greek tyrant back in the BCs, who certainly might have been Hitler's twin brother. The argument went on for a bit. All day I've been wanting to talk to somebody about this business. It's funny, I'm not a fool, but I'm not eyebrow either. And God knows at normal times I don't have any interest that you wouldn't expect a middle-aged £7 a weeker with 2 kids to have. You have enough sense to see that the old laugh we're used to has been sawn off at the roots. I can feel it happening. I can see the war that's coming, and I can see the after-war, the food queues and the secret police and the loudspeaker telling you what to think. I'm not even exceptional in this. There are millions of others like me, ordinary chaps that I meet everywhere, chaps I run across in pubs, bus drivers and travelling salesmen from hardware firms. I've got a feeling the world's gone wrong. They can feel things cracking and collapsing under their feet. And yet here's this learned chap who's lived all his life with books and soaked himself in history till it's running out of his pores, and he can't even see that things are changing. Doesn't think Hitler matters. Refuses to believe there's another war coming. In any case, as he didn't fight in the last war, it doesn't enter much into his thoughts. He thinks it were a poor show compared with the siege of Troy. Doesn't see why one should be bothered about slogans and the loudspeakers and the coloured shirts. What intelligent person would pay any attention to such things? He always says Hitler and Stalin will pass away. There's something which old Porteous calls the eternal verities won't pass away. This, of course, is simply another way of saying that things will always go on exactly as he's known them. Forever and ever, cultivated Oxford blokes will stroll up and down studies full of books, quoting Latin tags and smoking good tobacco out of jars with coats of arms on them. Really, it was no use talking to him. I'd got more change out of the lad with towel-coloured hair. By degrees the conversation twisted off, as it always does, to things that happened BC. Then it worked round the poetry. Finally old Porteous drags another book out of the shelves and begin reading Keats' Ode to a Nightingale, or maybe it was Starlark, I forget. So far as I'm concerned, the little poetry goes a long way. There's a curious fact that I rather like hearing old Porteous read it aloud. There's no question that he reads well. He's got the habit, of course, used to reading to class of boys. He'll lean up against something in his lounging way, with his pipe between his teeth, and little jets of smoke coming out, and his voice goes kind of solemn, and rises and falls with a laugh. You can see that it moves him in some way. I don't know what poetry is, or what it's supposed to do. I imagine it has a kind of nervous effect on some people, like music has on others. When he's reading, I don't actually listen. As I said, I don't take in the words. But sometimes the sound of it brings a kind of peaceful feeling into my mind. On the whole, I like it, but somehow tonight it didn't work. There was a cold draft that blown into the room. I just felt that this were all bunk. Poetry, what is it? Just a voice, a bit of an eddy in the air. And gosh, what use would that be against machine guns? I watched him leaning up against the bookshelf. Funny, these public school chaps. Schoolboys all their days. Whole life revolving around the old school and the bits of Latin and Greek and poetry. And suddenly I remembered that almost the first time I were here with Porteous, he'd read me the very same poem. Read it in just the same way, and his voice quavered when he got to the same bit. A bit about magic casements or something. And a curious thought struck me. He's dead. He's a ghost. All people like that are dead. It struck me that perhaps a lot of people you see walking about are dead. They say that a man's dead when his heart stops and not before. Seems a bit arbitrary, after all. Parts of your body don't stop working. Hair goes on growing for years, for instance. Perhaps a man really dies when his brain stops, when he loses the power to take in new ideas. Old Porteous is like that. Wonderfully learned, wonderfully good taste, but he's not capable of change. Just says the same thing and thinks the same thoughts over and over again. There are a lot of people like that. Dead minds stopped inside. Just keep moving backwards and forwards on the same little track, getting fainter all the time, like ghosts. Old Porteous's mind, I thought, probably stopped working at about the time of the Russo-Japanese War. And it's a ghastly thing that nearly all the decent people who don't want to go around smashing faces in with spanners, are like that. They're decent, but their minds are stopped. They can't defend themselves against what's coming to them, because they can't see it, even when it's under their noses. They think that England will never change, that England's the old world. Can't grasp that it's just a leftover, a tiny corner that bombs happen to have missed. What about the new kind of men from Eastern Europe? The steamline men who think in slogans and talk in bullets? They're on our track, not long before they catch up with us. No Marquis of Queensberry rules for those boys. And all the decent people are paralysed, dead men and live gorillas. Don't seem to be anything between. I cleared out about half an hour later, having completely failed to convince old Porteous the Hitler matters. I was still thinking the same thoughts as I walked home through the shivery streets. The trams had stopped running. The house were all dark and Hilda were asleep. I dropped my false teeth into a glass of water in the bathroom, got into my pyjamas and prized Hilda over to the other side of the bed. She rolled over without waking, and with a kind of hump between her shoulders towards me. It's funny, the tremendous gloom that sometimes gets hold of you late at night. In that moment, the destiny of Europe seemed to me more important than the rent and the kids' school bills and the work I'd have to do tomorrow. For anyone who has to earn his living, such thoughts are just plain foolishness. But they didn't move out of my mind. Still, the visions of the coloured shirts and the machine guns rattling. The last thing I remember wondering before I fell asleep was why the other chap like me should care. That's the end of chapter 1 of part 3. I'll have a quick swallow of water. There's a lot to say about that chapter. I think the most interesting part, the most striking part to me at least, is how kind of neutral our narrator is towards fascists. Because I mean, the modern day fascism is pretty clearly I think what's the term? Reasonably reviled, you know. Oh. Lutina, welcome in. Thank you for stopping by. Welcome in, Raiders. If you're just here for the first time, my name is SkitterSkreetch, and I am a small rat inside a big library. Welcome in. Essa, welcome in. Glad to have you. But yeah, so I am SkitterSkreetch. I'm a small rat inside a big library, of which this is just a small portion. And I read books at the behest of this lamp for reasons that are quite complex and hard to go into. But welcome in. You've just joined us in time for, well, we've just finished the first chapter of part 3 of Come Up for Air by George Orwell. We were about to do a little bit of discussion about it, but yeah, I read books of various types. We do some fiction, some non-fiction, a little bit of everything, a bit of poetry at the start of things. But yeah, welcome in. If you've got a raven run, I will absolutely understand. You've got to take care of yourself. If you want to stick around and give it a go, I'll happily try and catch you up on what has happened. Although, at this point, I think it's more interesting to sort of just go with things. The narrative doesn't really matter too much in this book. It's more about reflections on the time. This Coming Up for Air was written just before the start of the Second World War, and it's sort of very much about the time. But yeah, welcome in. Thank you very much. Iki, welcome in. Let me give while I remember, a shout out. Oh, and the ad's about to start. Let's put them on pause for a moment. Just come in. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you kindly, Lieutenant. Yeah, if you do have to raid them on, I've got no yeah. Ooh. That just says to Lieutenant. I don't know if that has gone to the right person. But yeah, I do appreciate you stopping by. If you do just need to raid and run, feel free, of course. If you want to lurk as well, like this is a very good... No? Okay, let's try that again then. Sorry. Oh, I have to wait a minute and 27 seconds before giving another shout out to anyone. Okay. Well, we'll wait for that. But yeah, if you do want to just lurk as well, this is a fine stream for that. Again, it is just going to be me reading, so I'm basically an audiobook. But yeah, what was it? But yeah. But welcome in. I do hope you decide to stick around. But if you don't, no worries. And thank you again, Lieutenant. I will get you that shout out just as soon as Twitter lets me. Sorry about that. But yeah, thank you for stopping by. What was it? Yeah, but go ahead. You have a good meal. I hope you look after yourself. And good luck with the bank thing, yeah. But yeah, what was it? So yeah, what's it? Oh yeah, but yeah, I think the most striking thing about this chapter, at least, is the way in which Orwell talks about fascism. And obviously, this is prior to the Second World War, so there's not as much of the sort of general contempt held for fascism as has been held in later days. But he's sort of strange, sort of seeing the perspective, really, because in it he's just, or he is just treating it as another group to sort of hate, you know, like another team. And obviously Orwell sort of writing is very considered. What's the term? He's very occupied with the sort of idea of mass thought politics, right? The idea of Big Brother in 1984 and groupthink and all this. And he's just treating it as a team thing. And obviously this is before, like, the post-war analysis and all the war crimes and everything, so you don't exactly have the same level of thing, but it is striking to see that. And at the same time, my character is judging people in a very kind of groupthinky way. Thank you for the follow.
Ikenobi has been bound to the library.
Welcome in, welcome in. But yeah, the sort of groupthink is a pretty big part of it, and obviously it's not... I don't know, it's strange, really. It's a very reflective sort of story, and the way that it is, thinking about the time, it's no problem. I'll be honest, I know a lot of people, but if I don't have at least a little bit of time in their stream, I tend not to follow them either, just because I think you've got to, judge, be in a presence of someone to judge them at least a little bit. Right, I think that should have been long enough to get the shout out, but let's just copy the command in case it doesn't go through this time. Oh, there we go. Don't know why that didn't work the last time. Anyhow, but yeah, I do appreciate it. But yeah, what else is there to say on this thing? But yeah, no problem at all. I do appreciate the follow anyway. I don't expect it, but I do appreciate it. Anyway, what am I talking about? Yes, fascism. The way that Orwell talks about fascism is interesting. Because Orwell was, avowedly sort of countered fascism later in life. But in this novel, he's given a very sort of different perspective, a sort of anti-war perspective. And it is obviously sort of a perspective that is very much painted by the anxieties of post-First World War sort of, post-First World War anxiety, the fear of another war. The sort of sense that the First World War was pointless. And I don't know, it's a strange perspective, really, because in the modern day, people tend to sort of group them together because historically they're quite close together and there's a lot of obviously overlapping historical tension. In retrospect, people tend to consider the Second World War as being significantly more justified. There were a lot of actual atrocities that were being encountered, and the ideology of fascism, having been better understood, was and is still generally considered monstrous. But in this perspective, in this sort of pre-war, pre-sort of exploration idea, it's just teams essentially, It's just point scoring, and he's a man who has fought a war and is afraid of doing it again. But yeah. Anyhow, Yeah, let's go a little bit back over what has happened so far, shall we? Just to catch up any raiders who are sticking around. But yeah, just to give you an idea, we follow the story of George Bowling, who is a standard sort of insurance salesman living a sort of middle-class life in a suburb of London, and we followed him on a journey. Oh.
Ikenobi has pledged themselves to Lamp as a Tier 1 initiate.
Well, thank you very kindly indeed, Ikenobi. I do so much appreciate that. Welcome to the library. Lord. Yeah, let's snooze those heads again. But yeah, so we're following the story of George Boland, who fairly standard insurance salesman, middle class, 2 kids, wife, none of whom he particularly likes, and we follow him on a fairly standard day of his living his life. Yes, the lamps grow ever more powerful as he lives his life in sort of 1938. Specifically on a day where he goes to get a new set of dentures and he's feeling a bit of his age. He's got a little bit of money that he's won in a bet that he's thinking about what to do with. And then as he's on his way home, he hears a piece of news and a name that is said sort of triggers a sense memory. We go back to his childhood in a small village as a son of a grain merchant where he's, like reasonably prosperous, but then over time the business goes bad and we see him follow his life, where from a young age he really falls in love with fishing, and it's something he never does past the age of I think 15 because he goes to work and he regrets it. We follow him as he, lives his life, starts working at I think 16 actually, not 15, starts to find out about girls, and at the age of 22 or 24, sometime there, the First World War happens and he signs up. We see him go through that, and then the post-war, he fights for a bit, he gets wounded just badly enough to get sent back, winds up in a sort of dead-end position, which doesn't mean anything, and then wastes away the last years of the war, basically 13 cans of tinned beef over and over again, and picks up reading as a habit. Then we just sort of follow him later in life, struggling to get a job post-war, working as a travelling salesman before eventually using one of the only connections he made during the war to land a slightly better travelling salesman job as this insurance salesman, and how he met his wife, and just a sort of general allotment. And a lot of it is focused around the anxieties of the Second World War. The novel is set in late 1938. It was published in early 1939, so he's right before the Second World War. So much of it is concerned with that. And the one chapter we've had so far today is just him going to. He's a member of the local Left Book Club, which is, I think, it's never explicitly stated, and I'm not too familiar, but I believe it is just leftist book club, like the leftist politics thing, which he's involved just to get cheap books through, and his wife is involved with because she likes free entertainment, essentially. She's got money troubles, and he's been there to listen to this man who is an anti-fascist lecturer talk about Hitler, and his reflection has basically been this man hates fascists with sort of a vehemence, but it's not an informed vehemence, it's a sort of tribalistic, instinctive vehemence, and that it's a sort of it's Hitler versus Stalin, black versus white, just teams and colours, and hating and hating and hating for the sake of it. And then he went to see his this friend of his who is a sort of bachelor and an educated man who read in poetry and who talked a bit about it, but only in historical terms, and reflected that his friend, despite his education, never really thought for himself and never changed. And that's about where we're at. But yeah. Oof. Yeah, but that's so anyone who wants to stay around, that's where we're at. And if you're interested in a more detailed summary, the VODs are, I think, still up on Twitch. If not, I'll transfer them all over to YouTube, so you can go and look over them if you think you're interested enough to go back over it. But yeah, it's a really well written book, and Orwell was very insightful. But oof, yeah, I'd start the next chapter now, but we are about a minute from the ads coming on again. I don't think I'm going to pause them again because I'm going to do it one more time. So yeah. Ooh. So I guess if you do have questions or if you want to hit any redeems, now would be a good moment to do that. Lord, oh Lord. Oh. Fair enough, yeah. So we stretch as we always do. We do the neck first before we stand. So, ooh. You can hear it. Ooh. Ooh. That's a handful of good clicks there. And we stand to do the back. Lord Almighty. Well, thank you for that. I did need that. I don't think I've ever heard my neck click that much. Anyhow, But yeah, what do we... Well, now we've got an awkward amount of time before the ads start. I should... Just to reiterate for anyone who... Probably not for the new raiders, but for any of my regulars who have stopped in. But I guess for the raiders too, if you want to stick around. Tomorrow we are finishing up... on Tuesdays we do what is called our Torrid Tuesday streams, where I read romance novels. Specifically, we've been reading Emma by Jane Austen. And tomorrow we will be finishing that up, so there will be a special badge for the occasion, which, if you are interested and want to stop by for that, it'll be a good time to do. Yeah, I do frat badges quite frequently, so if you do want to hang around, you're quite likely to get a few of them, because I like making them and they're easy. But I've got a planned series of them for the Torrid Tuesday thing, so I'm just promoting those so people know that they're happening. But yeah, ads is on in about 20 seconds, so... Whoa. That should be everyone caught on. Of course, given that I know that there are people who are subscribed in chat, including Iki. Once again, thank you for that, Iki. Very, very generous of you. I do now need to think what I'm going to do in the 3 minutes of ads, which is terrifying. But yeah. Okay, so ads is on. I start by having a quick swallow of water. This is always good to use your minutes. My day's been pretty alright, yeah. It's basically been an errands day for me, really. Just, got up. When did I get up? Oh, about 10 o'clock. I had to run around, get a few little bits and bobs. I gotta keep, there's always maintenance to do in the library. I'm still building some of the shelves across the way. Lamp has been teaching me more about the golem craft, which she agreed to do a while back. It's sort of awkward because he still refuses to teach me actual magic. So I can't learn like the spells and the underlying principles, but there's a bunch of pre-made components. So he's walking me through putting one of them together. I think we'll have something presentable in a week or two. I'm not exactly sure when, but I think sometime in September we'll have something to do. Ooh, my favourite book so far. That's a hard one. I've liked a lot of different ones for different reasons. Let's have a quick wander around, shall we? Let's see. So, Animal Farm is the one that's probably had the most views on the thing. Let's go through it. Let's see. That's Raspin's. None of them particularly. I've been enjoying doing the Austen, but we still haven't finished that. Haven't read those yet. Oh, I did enjoy the Sonnets of Shakespeare, actually. They were the sort of first poetry we did, isn't it? That was a good time. Haven't done the fairy tales yet. Some of these were good. I'm trying to think. Not this one, that's a bad one. I haven't read that one. Where else? I did enjoy the poem. Well, actually, here's one. It's maybe not my favourite entirely, but the one that I think is probably the best and one of the fewest people have heard of is this one here, Mr. Harrison's Confessions. It's sort of Regency, like a small town drama, sort of semi-romance, but it was very, very funny for being what it was, which I didn't expect. Made me laugh out loud a couple of times. Really enjoyed that one. Mark Twain down it. I like quite a lot of the Twain. Twain is good in sort of general sense. Some of the ballads has been good. I read quite a lot of Jack London. Those are some of the early ones, which I enjoyed. I do enjoy Jack London, but I'm trying to think of the standouts. It's hard because I tend to get a general impression of authors over time more than anything particularly. Like all of this M.R. James. Some of the Hemingway is good. God, I'm struggling here. Yeah. Actually, this one might be a standout as well. Damien Runyon. That's another slightly older one, but the Damien Runyon ones are very fun. They're very funny. They're very readable. We'll recommend it. We'll talk about them. Dubliners was very good. I like the Fitzgerald. I'd struggle to say, really. Ooh. And welcome back from the ads, people. Sorry for me flying here through the air. Ooh. We were just having a little tour around the library during the time. But yeah. To answer your question, Iki, I'd say probably my favourite individual book is... I think I'll stick with Mr. Harrison's Confessions. That's the one that I think really... It was good and it surprised me by a bit how good it was. So yeah. But yeah. Day's been good. Books are good. But let's get back into things, because I always get distracted and then I'm like, well, we've got to press on with the book or I'll be reading for all night. yeah, thank you all for stopping by. Thank you again for the subscription, the follow, everyone. And yeah, we'll press on ahead. So, part 3, chapter 2. The primroses had started. I suppose it was sometime in March. I'd driven through West Strand and were making for Pudley. I got to do an assessment of an ironmonger's shop, and then, if I could get hold of him, to interview a life insurance case who were wavering in the balance. His name had been sent in by a local agent. At the last moment he'd taken fright and begun to doubt whether he could afford it. I'm pretty good at talking people round. It's being fat that does it. It puts people in a cheery kind of mood, makes them feel that signing the cheque is almost a pleasure. Of course, there are different ways of tackling different people. With some, it's better to lay all the stress on the bonuses. Others you can scare in a subtle way with hints about what will happen to their wives as they die uninsured. The old car switched backed up and down the curly little hills, and by God, what a day. You know the kind of day that generally comes sometime in March, when winter suddenly seems to give up fighting. For days past we've been having the kind of beastly weather that people call bright weather. The skies are cold hard blue and the wind scrapes you like a blunt razor blade. Why? Yeah. It's nice, the old books. The library I have access to is, or that I'm scavenging all this from, it was last updated in 1957. So it's a lot of old stuff mostly, but yeah. Some of it's in bad condition, but I think it's always fun to go through it. You never know what you're going to see, you know? Yeah, there's a smell that old books have that is really just delightful. Which is good, because it's all I smell down here. I'd recommend it. You always forget how good a book can be unless it grabs you. So, and the wind scrapes you like a blunt razor blade. Then suddenly the wind had dropped and the sun got a chance. You know the kind of day. Pale yellow sunshine, not a leaf stirring, a touch of mist in the far distance when you can see the sheep scattered over the hillsides like lumps of chalk. And down in the valleys fires was burning, and the smoke twisted slowly upwards and melted into the mists. I got the road to myself. It was so warm you could almost have taken your clothes off. I got to a spot where the grass beside the road was smothered in primroses. A patch of clay soil, perhaps. 20 yards further on, I slowed and stopped. The weather was too good to miss. I felt I'd got to get out and have a smell at the spring air, and perhaps even pick a few primroses if there were nobody coming. I even had some vague notion of picking a bunch of them to take home to Hilda. I switched the engine off and got out. I never liked leaving the old car running in neutral. Always half afraid she'll shake her mudguards off or something. She's a 1927 model, and she's done a biggish mileage. When you lift the bonnet and look at the engine, it reminds you of the old Austrian Empire, all tied together with bits of string, but somehow keeps plugging along. You wouldn't believe any machine can vibrate in so many directions at once. It's like the motion of the Earth, which has 22 different kinds of wobble, so I remember reading. If you look at her from behind when she's running in neutral, it's for all the world like watching one of those Hawaiian girls dancing the hula hula. There are a 5-bar gate beside the road. I strolled over and near the crossing. Not a soul in sight. I hitched my hat back a little bit to get the kind of balmy feel in the air against before it. The grass under the edges were full of primroses. Just inside the gate, a tramp or somebody had left the remains of a fire. A little pile of white embers and a wisp of smoke still oozing out of them. Further along, there were a field of winter wheat. There were a little bit of a pool covered over with duckweed. The field was a winter wheat. It sloped sharply, and there were full of chalk and a little beach spinney. I kind of missed the young leaves on the trees.
SOFly7 has been bound to the library.
Well, thank you for the follow, Esso. I do appreciate it. And thank you for the hydrate night. Nostrovia, your good elf. I do appreciate it. Hey, not welcome in. If you're just catching up with us, this stream, the only thing you missed is a chapter with a lecture on anti-fascism and sort of some very classic Orwell, like two teams and being told who to hate sort of stuff. Yeah. and we're now out on our way to an ironmonger's on a lovely March day. Farther along there a little bit of a pool covered over with duckweed. Oh, I got it, E-Sofa, okay. Well, thank kindly, E. The field were winter wheat. It sloped up sharply, and there were a fall of chalk and a little speech spinning. I kind of missed the young leaves on the trees. The utter stillness everywhere, not even enough wind to stir the ashes of the fire. A lark singing somewhere, otherwise not a sound, not even an airplane. I stayed there for a bit, leaning over the gate. I were alone, quite alone. I were looking at the field, and the field were looking at me. I wonder whether you'll understand. What I felt was something that's so unusual nowadays, but to say it sounds like foolishness. I felt happy. I felt that though I shan't live forever, I'd be quite ready to. Oh, I just thought, hope you relax well after your work. Oh, sad night, I just noticed that, sorry. I felt that though I shan't live forever, I'd be quite happy to. If you like, you can say that it were merely because it was the first day of spring. Seasonal effects on the sex glands or something. There were more of it than that. Curiously enough, the thing that had suddenly convinced me that life were worth living, more than the primroses and the young buds on the edge, was that bit of fire near the gate. You know the look of a wood fire on a still day? The sticks that have gone all to white ash, and they still keep the shapes of sticks, and under the ash the kind of vivid red that you can see into. It's curious that a red ember looks more alive, gives you more of a feeling of life than any living thing. There's something about it, a kind of intensity, a vibration. I can't think of the exact words. It lets you know that you're alive yourself. It's the spot on the picture that makes you notice everything else. I bent down to pick a primrose. Couldn't reach it, too much belly. I squatted down on my haunches and picked a little bunch of them. Luckily there were no one to see me. The leaves was kind of crinkly and shaped like rabbit's ears. I stood up and put my bunch of primroses on the gatepost. Then on an impulse I slid my false teeth out of my mouth and had a look at them. If I'd had a mirror I'd have looked at the whole of myself, though as a matter of fact I knew what I looked like already. A fat man of 45 in a grey herringbone suit, bit the worse for wear and a bowler hat. Wife, 2 kids and a house in the suburbs written all over me. Red face and boiled blue eyes. I know you don't have to tell me. The thing that struck me as I gave my dental plate that once over before slipping it back into my mouth, well, it doesn't matter. Even false teeth don't matter. I'm fat, yes. I look like a bookie's unsuccessful brother, yes. No woman will ever go to bed with me again unless she's paid to. I know all that. But I tell you, I don't care. I don't want the women. I don't even want to be young again. I only want to be alive. And I was alive that moment when I stood looking at the primroses and the red embers under the edge. There's a feeling inside you, a kind of peaceful feeling. Your head's like a flame. Farther down the edge, the pool was covered with duckweed. So like a carpet that if you didn't know what duckweed was, you might think it was solid and step on it. I wondered why it was like that. I wondered why it was all such bloody fools. Why don't people, instead of the idiocies they do spend their time on, just walk around looking at things? That pool, for instance. All the stuff that's in it. Newts, water snails, water beetles, caddisflies, leeches, and God knows how many other little things you can only see with a microscope. The mysteries of their lives down there underwater. You could spend a lifetime watching them, 10 lifetimes, and still you wouldn't have got the end of even that one pool. And all the while the sort of feeling of wonder, the peculiar flame inside you. It's the only thing worth having, and we don't want it. But I do want it. At least I thought so at that moment. I don't mistake what I'm saying. To begin with, unlike most cockneys, I'm not soppy about the country. I brought out a damn sight too near to it for that. I don't want to stop people living in towns or in suburbs for that matter. Let them live wherever they like. I'm not suggesting that the whole of humanity could spend the whole of their lives wandering round, picking primroses and so forth. I know perfectly well we've got to work. It's only because the chaps are coughing their lungs out in mines and girls are hammering at typewriters that anyone ever has time to pick a flower. Besides, if you hadn't a full belly and a warm house, you wouldn't want the big flowers. That's not the point. Here's this feeling that I get inside me. Not often, I admit, but now and again. I know it's a good feeling to have. What's more so does everybody else. And nearly everybody. It's just around the corner all the time. And we know it's there. Stop firing that machine gun. Stop chasing whatever you're chasing. Calm down. Get your breath back. Let a bit of peace sleep into your bones. No use. You won't do it. Just keep on with the same bloody fooleries. And the next war coming over the horizon. 1941, they say. 3 more circles of the sun, and then we whiz straight into it. The bombs diving down here like black cigars, and the streamlined bullets streaming from the brand machine guns. Not that worries me particularly. I'm too old to fight. There'll be air raids, of course, but they won't hit everybody. Besides, even if that kind of danger exists, it doesn't really enter into one's thoughts beforehand. As I've said several times already, I'm not frightened of the war, only the after-war. And even that isn't likely to affect me personally, because who'd bother about a chap like me? I'm too fat to be a political suspect. No one will bump me off or cosh me with a rubber truncheon. I'm the ordinary, middling kind that moves on when the policeman tells him. As for Hilda and the kids, they'd probably never notice the difference. And it frightens me. The barbed wire, the slogans, the enormous faces, cork-lined cellars where the executioner plugs you from behind. That Marriott frightens other chaps who are intellectually a good deal dumber than I am. But why? Because it means goodbye to this thing. I've been telling you about this special feeling inside you. Call it peace if you like. When I say peace, I don't mean the absence of war. I mean peace, a feeling in your guts. It's gone forever if the rubber truncheon boys get hold of us. I picked up my bunch of primroses. They had a smell as them. I was thinking of Lower Binfield. It was funny how for 2 months past they'd been in and out of my mind all the time. After 20 years, during which I'd practically forgotten it. And just at this moment, there was the zoom of a car coming up the road. It brought me up with a kind of jolt. I suddenly realised what I was doing, wandering round picking primroses when I ought to have been going through the inventory of that ironmonger's shop in Budley. All the more it suddenly struck me what I'd look like if the people in the car saw me. A fat man in a bowler hat holding a bunch of primroses. Wouldn't look right at all. Fat men mustn't pick primroses, at any rate in public. I just had time to chuck them over the edge before the car come in sight. It was a good job I'd done so. The car was full of young fools of about 20. How they'd have sniggered if they'd have seen me. They was all looking at me. You know how people look at you when they're in a car coming towards you. The thought struck me that even now they might somehow guess what I've been doing. Better look at them and think it was something else. Why should a chap get out of his car at the side of the country road? Obvious. As the car went past, I pretended to be doing up a fly button. I cranked up the car, the cell started up work any longer, and got in. Curiously enough, in the very moment when I was doing up the fly button, and my mind were about 3/4 full of those young fools in other cars, a wonderful idea occurred to me. I'd go back to Lower Binfield. Why not? I thought as I jammed her in the top gear. Why shouldn't I? What was to stop me? And why the hell hadn't I thought of it before? A quiet holiday in Lower Binfield, just the thing I wanted. Don't imagine I had any idea of going back to live in Lower Binfield. I wasn't planning to desert Hilda and the kids and start life under a different name. That kind of thing only happens in books. What was to stop me slipping down the Lower Binfield and having a week there all by myself in the QT? I seemed to have it all planned out in my mind already. It was alright as far as the money went. There was still 12 quid left in that secret pile of mine, and you can have a very comfortable week on 12 quid. I get a fortnight's holiday a year, generally in August to September. If I made up some suitable story, relative dying of incurable disease or something, I could probably get the firm to give me a holiday in 2 separate arcs. Then I could have a week all to myself before Hilda knew what was happening. In May, for instance, when the hawthorn was in bloom. A week in Lower Binfield with no Hilda, no kids, no flying salamander, no Ellesmere Road, no rumpers about the hire purchase payments, no noise of traffic driving you silly. Just a week of loafing around and listening to the quietness. Why do I want to go back to Lower Binfield? You say, why Lower Binfield in particular? What did I mean to do when I got there? I didn't mean to do anything. That was part of the point. I wanted peace and quiet. Peace. We had it once in Lower Binfield. I've told you something about our old life there before the war. I'm not pretending it were perfect. I dare say it were a dull, sluggish, vegetable kind of life. You can say we were like turnips, if you like. But turnips don't live in terror of the boss. They don't lie awake at night thinking about the next slump and the next war. We had peace inside us. Of course, I knew that even in Lower Binfield, life would have changed. But the place itself wouldn't have. There'd still be the Booch Woods around Binfield House, the towpath down by Burford Ware, the horse trough and the marketplace. I want to get back there, just for a week, and the feeling of it soak into me. A bit like one of these eastern sages retiring into a desert. And I should think the way things are going, there'll be a good many people retiring into the desert during the next few years. It'll be like the time in ancient Rome that old Porteous were telling me about, when there were so many hermits there were a waiting list for every cave. But it wasn't that I wanted to watch my navel. I only wanted to get my nerve back before the bad times begin. Because does anyone who isn't dead from the neck up doubt that there's bad times coming? We don't even know what it'll be, and yet we know it's coming. Perhaps a war, perhaps a slump. Not knowing except there will be something bad. Wherever we're going downwards, into the grave, into the cesspool. Not knowing. And you can't face that kind of thing unless you've got the right feeling inside you. There's something that's gone out of me in this 20 years since the war. Something that's gone out of us. There's a kind of vital juice that we squirted away until there's nothing left. All this rushing to and fro, everlasting scramble for a bit of cash, everlasting din of buses, bombs, radios, telephone bells. Knows when all the bits, empty places in our bones where the marrow ought to be. I shoved my foot down on the accelerator. The very thought of going back to Lower Binfield had done me good already. You know the feeling I had? Coming up for air, like the big sea turtles when they come paddling up to the surface, stick their noses out and fill their lungs with a great gulp before they sink down again among the seaweed and the octopuses. It was stifling at the bottom with a dustbin, but I found the way to the top. Back to Lower Binfield. I kept my foot on the accelerator until the old car worked up to her maximum speed, at nearly 40 miles an hour. She was rattling like a tin can tray full of crockery, and under cover of the noise I nearly started singing. Of course, the fly in the milk jug was Hilda. That thought pulled me up a bit. I slowed down to about 20 to think it over. There weren't much doubt. Hilda would find out sooner or later. As to getting only a week's holiday in August, I might be able to pass that off all right. I could tell the firm were only giving me a week this year. Probably she wouldn't ask too many questions about that, because she'd jump at the chance of cutting down the holiday expenses. The kids, in any case, always stay at the seaside for a month. Where the difficulty came in was finding an alibi for that week in May. I couldn't just clear off without notice. Best thing I thought would be to tell her a good while ahead that I was being sent on some special job to Nottingham or Derby or Bristol, or some other place a good long way away. If I told her about it 2 months ahead, it would look as if I hadn't anything to hide. Of course she'd find out sooner or later. Trust Hilda. You start off by pretending to believe it, and then in that quiet, obstinate way she has, she knows out the fact that I've never been to Nottingham or Derby or Bristol or wherever it might be. It's astonishing how she does it. Such perseverance. She lies low till she found all about the weak points in your alibi, and then suddenly, when you put your foot in it by some careless remark, she starts on you. Suddenly comes out with the old dossier of the case. Where did you spend last Saturday night? That's a lie. You've been off with a woman. Look at her, all these hairs I found when I was brushing your waistcoat. Look at them. Is my hair that colour? And then the fun begins. Lord knows how many times it's happened. Sometimes she's been right about the woman, and sometimes she's been wrong. But the after effect is always the same. Nagging for weeks on end, ne'er a meal without a row. And the kids can't make out what it's all about. The one completely hopeless thing would be just to tell her where I'd spent that week and why. If I explained till the day of judgment, she'd never believe that. But hell, I thought, what bother? We're a long way off. You know how different these things can seem before and after. I shoved my foot down on the accelerator again. I had another idea, almost bigger than the first. I wouldn't go in May. I'd go in the second half of June, when the coarse fishing season had started. I'd go fishing. Why not, after all? I wanted peace, and fishing is peace. And then the biggest idea of all came into my head, and very nearly made me swing the car off the road. I'd go and catch those big carp in the pool at Binfield House. Once again, why not? Isn't it queer how we go through life, always thinking that things we want to do are the things that can't be done? Why shouldn't I catch those carp? Yet as soon as the idea mentioned, doesn't it sound to you like something impossible? Something that just couldn't happen? It seemed so to me even at that moment. It seemed to me kind of like a dope dream, like the ones you have sleeping with film stars or winning the heavyweight championship. It wasn't in the least impossible. It wasn't even improbable. Fishing can be rented. Whoever owned Binfield House now will probably let the pool, if they get enough for it. But gosh, I'd be glad to pay £5 for a day's fishing in that pool. If that mattered, quite likely the house was still empty and nobody even knew the pool existed. I thought of it in the dark place among the trees, waiting for me all those years, and the huge black fish still gliding round it. Jesus, if they was that size 30 years ago, what would they be like now? And that's the end of chapter 2, sorry. And I'll have a quick swallow of water. And yeah. Well, the path is set then, isn't it? Not too much to talk about in terms of practical here, other than sort of the philosophy of this moment of peace, the idea of, well, seeking after it. A beautiful sort of philosophy, but I'm running a little behind where I wanted to be, so I'll probably press on quite sharply at this point. But yeah, back to Lower Binfield it seems. Part 3, Chapter 3. It was June the 17th, Friday, the second day of the coarse fishing season. I hadn't had any difficulty in fixing things with the firm. As for Hilda, I'd fitted her up with a story that were all ship-shape and watertight. I fixed on Birmingham for my alibi, and at the last moment I'd even told her the name of the hotel I was going to stay at, Rowbottom's Family and Commercial. I happened to know the address because I'd stayed there some years earlier. At the same time, I didn't want her writing to me at Birmingham, which she might do if I were away as long as a week. After thinking it over, I took young Saunders, who travels for Glisso floor polish, partly into my confidence. He happened to mention that he'd be passing through Birmingham on the 18th of June. I got him to promise that he'd stop on his way and post a letter from me to Hilda, addressed from Rowbottom's. This was to tell her that I might be called away and she'd better not write. Saunders understood, or thought he did. He gave me a wink and said I were wonderful for my age. So that settled Hilda. She hadn't asked any questions, and even if she turned suspicious later, an alibi like that would just take some breaking. I drove through Westerham. It was a wonderful June morning. A faint breeze blowing and the elm tops swaying in the sun, little white clouds streaming across the sky like a flock of sheep, and the shadow chasing each other across the fields. Outside Westerham, a Wall's ice cream lad, with cheeks like apples, come tearing towards me on his bike, whistling till it went through your head. It suddenly reminded me of the time when I'd been an errand boy myself, though in those days I didn't have three-wheel bikes. I very nearly stopped him and took one. They cut the A in places, but they hadn't got it in yet. It lay drying in long shiny rows, and the smell of it drifted across the road and got mixed up with the petrol. I drove along at a gentle 15. The morning had a kind of peaceful, dreamy feeling. The ducks floated about on ponds as if they felt too satisfied to eat. In Nettlefield, the village beyond Westerham, a little man in a white apron with grey hair and a huge grey moustache darted across the green, planted himself in the middle of the road, and began doing physical jerks to attract my attention. My car's known all along this road, of course. I pulled up. It's only Mr. Weaver, who keeps the village general shop. No, he doesn't want to insure his life, nor the shop either. He's merely run out of change and wants to know whether I've got a quid's worth of large silver. They never have any change in Nettlefield, or even at the pub. I drove on. The wheat would have been as tall as your waist. It was undulating up and down the hills like a great green carpet, with the wind rippling it in a little kind of thick and silky looking. It's like a woman, I thought. Makes you want to lie on it. And a bit ahead of me, I saw the signpost where the road forks right for Pudley and left for Oxford. I was still on my usual beat, inside the boundary of my own district, as the firm calls it. The natural thing, as I was going westward, would have been to leave London along the Uxbridge Road, but by a kind of instinct I'd followed my usual route. Fact was, I was feeling guilty about the old business. I wanted to get well away before I headed for Oxfordshire, and in spite of the fact that I'd fixed things so neatly with Hilda and the firm, in spite of the 12 quid in my pocketbook, and the suitcase in the back of the car, as I got nearer the crossroad I actually felt a temptation. I knew I wasn't going to succumb to it, and yet it was a temptation to chunk the whole thing up. I had a sort of feeling that so long as I was driving along my normal beat, I was still inside the law. It's not too late, I thought. There's still time to do the respectable thing. I could run into Pudley, for instance, see the manager of Barclays Bank, he's her agent at Pudley, and find out if any new business has come in. For that matter, I could even turn round, go back to Hilda, and make a clean breast of the plot. I slowed down as I got to the corner. Should I or shouldn't I? For about a second I was really tempted, but no. I tooted the klaxon and swung the car westward, onto the Oxford Road. Well, I'd done it. I were on the forbidden ground. It was true that 5 miles further on, if I wanted to, I could turn the left again and get back into Westerham. But for the moment I were headed westward. Strictly speaking, I were in flight. A little curious, I was no sooner on the Oxford Road, and I felt perfectly calm that they knew all about it. When I say they, I mean all the people who wouldn't approve of a trip of this kind, and who would have stopped me if they could, which I suppose would include pretty well everybody. What was more, I actually had a feeling that they were after me already, the whole lot of them. All the people who couldn't understand why a middle-aged man with false teeth should sneak away for a quiet week in a place where he spent his boyhood. And all the mean-minded bastards who could understand only too well, and who'd raise heaven and earth to prevent it. They were all on my track. It was as if a huge army was streaming up the road behind me. I seemed to see them in my mind's eye. Hilda were in front, of course, with the kids tagging after her, and Mrs. Wheeler driving her forward with a grim, vindictive expression, and Miss Minns rushing along in the rear with her pince-nez slipping down, and a look of distress on her face, like the end that gets left behind when the others have got hold of the bacon rind. And Sir Herbert Crumb and the higher-ups of the Flying Salamander in their Rolls Royces and Hispano Suizes, and all the chaps at the office, and all the poor downtrodden pen pushers from the Ellesmere Road, and from all such other roads, some of them wheeling prams and mowing machines, and concrete garden rollers, some of them chugging along in little Austin Sevens, and all the soul savers and nosy Parkers, the people who you've never seen but who rule your destiny all the same, the Home Secretary, Scotland Yard, the Temperance League, the Bank of England, Lord Beaverbrook, Hitler and Stalin on tandem bicycle, the bench of bishops, Mussolini, the Pope. There was all of them after me. I could almost hear them shouting, "There's a chap who thinks he's going to escape. There's a chap who says he won't be streamlined. He's going back to Lower Binfield after him. Stop him." It's queer. The impression was so strong that I actually took a peep through the little window at the back of the car, make sure I wasn't being followed. Guilty conscience, I suppose. There were nobody. Only the dusty white road and the long line of the elms dwindling out behind me. I trod on the gas. The old car rattled into the 30s. A few minutes later I passed Westerham, or I passed the Westerham turning. So that with that, I burnt my boats. This was the idea which, in a dim sort of way, had begun to form itself into my mind the day I got my new false teeth. And that's the end of part 3. I'll have a quick swallow of water. And yeah, strange really. Part 1 and part 3 are much shorter than part 2. But yeah, I mean this one just is him making the decision to go back on this trip. But yeah, I don't think there's too much to say again about it. It's odd though the way that he does feel guilty as well. It's quite a sort of normal thing to do. You think about it, you know, go back to your childhood home, bit of fishing, bit of an holiday, but it's strange the way he sort of gets caught up in it. It's something you think of as quite a modern attitude to sort of workaholism, but well, nothing's new, as they say. Anyhow, no sense dwelling on things though. Let's press on ahead. So, part 4, chapter 1. I come towards Lower Binfield over Chamford Hill. There are 4 roads in the Lower Binford, and it would have been more direct to go through Walton. But I wanted to come over Chamford Hill, the way we used to go when we backed home from fishing in the Thames. When you get just past the crown of the hill, the trees open out and you can see Lower Binfield lying in the valley below you. It's a queer experience to go over a bit of country you haven't seen in 20 years. You remember it in great detail, and you remember it all wrong. All the distances are different, and the landmarks seem to have moved about. You keep feeling, surely this hill used to be a lot steeper. Surely that turning were on the other side of the road. On the other hand, you'll have memories which are perfectly accurate, which only belong to one particular occasion. You remember, for instance, a corner of a field on a wet day in winter, the grass so green that it's almost blue, and a rotten gatepost covered with lichen, a cow standing in the grass and looking at you. And you'll go back after 20 years and be surprised, because the cow isn't standing in the same place and looking at you with the same expression. As I drove up Chamford Hill, I realised the picture I'd had of it in my mind were almost entirely imaginary. But it were a fact that certain things had changed. The road with tarmac, whereas in the old days it used to be macadam. I remember the bumpy feeling of it under the bike, and it seemed to have got a whole lot wider. And there were far less trees. In the old days, there used to be huge beeches growing in the hedgerow. In places, their boughs met across the road and made a kind of arch. Now it was all gone. I'd nearly got to the upper hill when I come to something that was certainly new. To the right of the road, there are a whole lot of fake picturesque houses, with overhanging eaves and rose pergolas and whatnot. You know, the kind of houses that are just a little too high class to stand in a row. So they're dotted about in a kind of colony, with private roads leading up to them. And at the entrance to one of the private roads, there are a huge white board which said, "The Kennels, Pedigree Sealy and Pups, Dogs Boarded." Surely that used to be there. I thought for a moment. Yes, I remembered. Where those houses stood, there used to be a little oak plantation, and the trees grew too close together so they weren't very tall and thin, and in spring the ground underneath them used to be smothered in anemones. Certainly there were never any houses as far out of the town as this. I got up to the top of the hill. Another minute and Lord Binfield would be in sight. Lord Binfield. Why should I pretend I wasn't excited? The very thought of seeing it again, an extraordinary feeling that started in my guts, crept upwards, and did something to my heart. 5 seconds more and I'd be seeing it. Yes, here we are. I declutched, trod on the footbrake and... Jesus! Oh yes, I know you knew what was coming, but I didn't. You can say I was a bloody fool not to expect it, and so I was. It hadn't even occurred to me. The first question was, where was Lower Binfield? I don't mean that it had been demolished, it had merely been swallowed. The thing I was looking down at was a good-sized malfunctioning manufacturing town. I remember, gosh I remember, in this case I don't think my memory is far out, what Lower Binfield used to look like from the top of Chamford Hill. I suppose the high street were about a quarter of a mile long, and except for a few outlying houses, the town were roughly the shape of a cross. The chief landmarks were the church tower and the chimney of the brewery. At this moment I couldn't distinguish either of them. All I could see were an enormous river of brand new houses which flowed along the valley in both directions, and halfway up the hills on either side. Over to the right there were what looked like several acres of bright red roofs, all exactly alike. A big council housing estate by the look of it. But where was Lower Binfield? Where was the town I used to know? Might have been anywhere. All I knew was that it was buried somewhere in the middle of that sea of bricks. The 5 or 6 factory chimneys that I could see, I couldn't even make a guess at what belonged to the brewery. Towards the eastern end of the town, there were 2 enormous factories of glass and concrete. That accounts for the growth of the town, I thought, as I began to take it in. It occurred to me that the population of this place used to be about 2,000 in the old days, must have been a good 25,000. The only thing that hadn't changed, seemingly, was Binfield House. It wasn't much more than a dot at the distance, but you could see it on the hillside opposite, with the beech trees round it, and the town hadn't climbed that high. As I looked, a fleet of black bombing planes came over the hill and zoomed across the town. I shoved the clutch in and started slowly down the hill. The houses had climbed halfway up it. You know those very cheap small houses which run up on the hillside in one continuous row, with the roofs rising one above the other like a flight of steps, all exactly the same? But a little before I got to the houses, I stopped again. On the left of the road there was something else that was quite new. The cemetery. I stopped opposite the lich gate to have a look at it. It were enormous, 20 acres I should think. There's always a kind of jumped up, unhomelike look about a new cemetery, with its raw gravel paths and its rough green sods, and the machine-made marble angels that looked like something off a wedding cake. What chiefly struck me at that moment was that in the olden days this place hadn't existed. There were no separate cemetery then, only the churchyard. I could vaguely remember that the farmer the fields used to belong to, Blackie his name was, and he were a dairy farmer. And somehow the raw look of the place brought it home to me how things had changed. It wasn't only that the town had grown so vast that they needed 20 acres to dump their corpses in, but they're putting the cemetery out here on the edge of town. Have you noticed they always do that nowadays? Every new town puts a cemetery on the outskirts. Shove it away, keep out of sight. Can't bear to be reminded of death. Even the tombstones tell you the same story. They never say that the chap underneath them died, it's always passed away or fell asleep. It wasn't so in the old days. We had our churchyard plumb in the middle of town. You passed it every day. You saw the spot where your grandfather was lying, and where someday you was going to lie yourself. We didn't mind looking at the dead. Not whether, I admit, we also had to smell them because some of the family vaults weren't too well sealed. I let the car run down the hill slowly. Queer. You can't imagine how queer. All the way down the hill I was seeing ghosts, chiefly the ghosts of edges and trees and cows. It was as if I were looking at two worlds at once, a kind of thin bubble of the thing that used to be, with the thing that actually existed shining through it. There's the field where the bull chased Ginger Rogers. There's the place where the horse mushrooms used to grow. There weren't any fields or bulls or any mushrooms. There were houses everywhere, little raw red houses with their grubby window curtains, and their scraps of back garden that hadn't anything in them except a patch of rank grass for a few larkspurs struggling out among the reeds. And blokes walking up and down, and women shaking out mats, and spotty-nosed kids playing along the pavement. All strangers. They'd all come crowding in while my back was turned. And it was they who'd have looked on me as a stranger. They didn't know anything about the Lower Binfield, they'd never heard. They didn't know anything about the old Lower Binfield. They'd never heard of Shooter and Wetherall, or Mr. Grimmett and Uncle Ezekiel, and cared less, you bet. It's funny how quickly one adjusts. I suppose it was 5 minutes since I'd halted at the top of the hill, actually a bit out of breath at the thought of seeing Lower Binfield again. And already I got used to the idea that Lower Binfield had been swallowed up and buried like the lost cities of Peru. I braced and faced it. After all, what else do you expect? Towns have got to grow, people have got to live somewhere. Besides, the old town hadn't been annihilated. Somewhere or other it still existed, that had houses round it instead of fields. In a few minutes I'll be seeing it again. The church and the brewery chimney and father's shop window, the horse trail and the marketplace. I got to the bottom of the hill, and the road forked. I took the left-hand turning, and a minute later I was lost. I could remember nothing. I couldn't even remember whereabouts the town used to begin. All I knew was that in the old days the street hadn't existed. For hundreds of yards I was running along, a rather mean, shabby kind of street, with the houses given straight on the pavement, and here and there a corner grocery or a dingy little pub, wondering where the hell it led to. Finally I pulled up beside a woman in a dirty apron and no hat who were walking down the pavement. I stuck my head out the window. "Beg your pardon, can you tell me the way to the marketplace?" She couldn't tell. Answered an accent you could cut with a spade. Lancashire. There's lots of them in the south of England now. Overflow from the distressed areas. Then I saw a bloke in overalls with a bag of tools coming along and tried again. This time I got the answer in Cockney. He had to think for a moment. Marketplace. Let's see now. Oh, you mean the old market? I suppose I did mean the old market. Well, you take the right hand turn here. It was a long way. Miles, it seemed to me. They really wasn't a mile. Houses, shops, cinemas, chapels, football grounds. All new. Again, I had that feeling of a kind of enemy invasion having happened behind my back. All these people flooding in from Lancashire and the London suburbs, planting themselves down in this beastly chaos, not even bothering to know the chief landmarks of the town by name. But I grasped presently why what we used to call the market was now known as the Old Market. There was a big square, that you couldn't properly call it a square, because it was no particular shape, in the middle of the new town, with traffic lights and a huge bronze statue of a lion worrying at an eagle. A war memorial, I suppose. And the newness of everything. The raw, mean look. Do you know the look of those new towns that have suddenly swelled up like balloons in the last few years? Hayes, Slough, Dagenham and so forth. The kind of chilliness, the bright red brick everywhere, the temporary-looking shop windows full of cut-price chocolates and radio parts. It was just like that. But suddenly I swung into the street with older houses. Gosh, the R Street. After all, my memory hadn't played tricks on me. I knew every inch of it now. Another couple 100 yards and I'd be in the marketplace. The old shop was down the other end of the R Street. I'd go there after lunch. I'm going to put up at the George. And every inch of memory. I knew all the shops, all the names had changed. And the stuff they dealt in had mostly changed as well. There's Lovegrove's, and there's Todd's, and a big dark shop with beams and dormer windows. It used to be Lillywhite's the Drapers, where Elsie used to work. And Grimmett's, still a grocer apparently. Now for the horse trial in the marketplace. There were another car ahead of me and I couldn't see it. It turned aside as we got in the marketplace. The horse trial were gone. There were an AA man on traffic duty where it used to stand. He gave a glance at the car, saw it had the AA sign and decided not to salute. I turned the corner and ran down to the George. The horse trap being done had thrown me to such an extent I hadn't even looked to see whether the brewery chimney was still standing. The George had altered too, all except the name. The front had been dolled up to look like one of those riverside hotels, and the sign was different. It was curious that although till that moment I hadn't thought of it once in 20 years, I suddenly found that I could remember every detail of the old sign, which had swung there ever since I could remember. It was a crude kind of picture, with St. George on a very thin horse trampling on a very fat dragon. And in the corner, though it cracked and faded, you could still read the little signature, W.M. Sanford, painter and carpenter. The new sign were kind of artistic looking. You could see it had been painted by a real artist. St. George looked regular pansy. The cobbled yard where the farmer's trap used to stand and the drunks used to puke on Saturday nights had been enlarged to about 3 times its size and concreted over with garages all round it. I backed the car into one of the garages and got out. One thing I've noticed about the human mind is it goes in jerks. There's no emotion that stays by you for any length of time. During the last quarter of an hour I'd had what you could fairly describe as a shock. I'd felt almost like a sock in the guts when I'd stopped at the top of Chamford Hill and suddenly realised that Lower Binfield had vanished and there'd been another little stab when I saw the horse trail was gone. I'd driven through the streets with a gloomy, Ichabod kind of feeling. But as I stepped out of the car and hitched my trilby hat on my head, I suddenly felt it didn't matter a damn. It was such a lovely sunny day. The hotel yard had a kind of summery look, with its flowers and green tubs and whatnot. Besides, I was hungry and looking forward to a spot of lunch. I strolled into the hotel with a consequential kind of air, with the boots who'd already nipped out to meet me, following with the suitcase. I felt pretty prosperous, probably I looked it. A solid businessman, you'd have said, at any rate if you hadn't seen the car. Well, glad I'd come in my new suit, blue flannel with a thin white stripe, which suits my style. It has what the tailors calls a reducing effect, I believe that. I believe that day I could have passed for a stockbroker. And say what you like, it's a very pleasant thing on a June day when the sun's shining and the pink geraniums in the window boxes, to walk into a nice country hotel with a roast lamb and mint sauce ahead of you. Not that it's any treat to me to stay in hotels. Lord knows I see all too much of them. But 99 times out of 100 it's those godless family and commercial hotels, like Rowbottom's, where I was supposed to be staying at present. The kind of places where you play fire bob for a bed and breakfast, and the sheets are always damp, and the bath taps never work. The George had got so smart I wouldn't have known it. In the old days it had hardly been an hotel, only a pub. I had a room or two to let and used to do farmer's lunch, roast beef in Yorkshire, suet dumplings and Stilton cheese, on market days. It seemed different except for the public bar, which I got a glimpse of as I went past, which looked the same as ever. I went out a passage with a soft carpet and hunting prints and copper warming pans and such junk-like junk hanging on the walls. And dimly I could remember the passage as it used to be, the hollowed-out flags underfoot, the smell of plaster mixed up with the smell of beer. A smart-looking young woman with frizzled hair and a black dress, I suppose with a clerk or something, took my name at the office. "You wish for a room, sir?" "Certainly, sir. What name shall I put down, sir?" I paused. After all, this was my big moment. She'd be pretty sure to know the name. In common, and there are a lot of us in the churchyard. We were one of the old Lower Binfield families. The Bowlings of Lower Binfield. Knowing the way it's painful to be recognised, I've been rather looking forward to it. "Bowling," I said very distinctly. "Mr. George Bowling." "Bowling, sir. B-O-W. Yes, sir. And you coming from London, sir?" No response. Nothing registered. She'd never heard of me. Never heard of George Boland, son of Samuel Boland. Samuel Boland, who, damn it, had his last half pint in the same pub had his half pint in the same pub every Saturday for over 30 years. That's the end of chapter 1 of part 4. I'll have a swallow of water. And I won't say anything on this because I think this is the sort of section that's going to be better, all taken as one thing, so we shall press instead immediately onwards. Part 4, Chapter 2. The dining room had changed too. I could remember the old room, though I never had a meal there, with its brown mantelpiece and its bronzy yellow wallpaper. I never knew it was meant to be that colour, it just got like that from age and smoke. And the oil painting, also by W.N. Sanford, painter and carpenter, at the Battle of Tel El Kebir. Now they've got the place up in a kind of medieval style. Brick fireplace, with inglehooks, a huge beam across the ceiling, oak panelling on the walls, and every bit of it fake that you could have spotted 50 yards away. The beam was genuine oak, came out of some old sailing ship probably. It didn't hold anything up. I had my suspicions of the panels as soon as I set eyes on them. As I sat down at my table and the slick young waiter came towards me, fiddling with his napkin, I tapped the wall behind me. Yeah, thought so. Not even wood. They figured up with some kind of composition and paint over it. The lunch wasn't bad. I had my lamb and mint sauce and had a bottle of some white wine or other with a French name, which made me belch a bit but made me feel happy. There were one other person lunching there, a woman of about 30, with fair hair. Looked like a widow. I wondered whether she was staying at the George and made a vague plans to get off with her. It's funny how your feelings get mixed up. Half the time I was seeing ghosts. The past was sticking out into the present. Market day and the great solid farmers throwing their legs under the long table, with their hobnails grating on the stone floor and working their way through the quantity of beef and dumplings you wouldn't believe the human frame could hold. And the little tables with their shiny white cloths and wine glasses and folding napkins, and the faked up decorations and the general expensiveness were blotted out again. And I think, I got 12 quid and a new suit. I'm little Georgie Boland, and who'd have believed I'd ever come back to Lower Binfield in my own motor car? And the wine would send a kind of warm feeling upward from my stomach. I'd run an eye over the woman with fair hair and mentally take her clothes off. But the same in the afternoon as I lay about in the lounge, faint medieval again, but it had streamlined leather armchairs and glass-top tables, with some brandy and a cigar. I was seeing ghosts. On the whole, I were enjoying it. As a matter of fact, I was a tiny bit boozed and hoping that the woman with fair hair would come in so that I could scrape acquaintance. She never showed up, however, until nearly tea time that I went out. I strolled up to the marketplace and turned to the left. A shop. It was funny. 21 years ago, the day of Mother's funeral, I passed it in the station flyer and seen it all shut up and dusty with the sign burnt off with a plumber's blow flame. I hadn't cared a damn. And now, when I was so much farther away from it, and there are actually details about the inside of the house that I couldn't remember, the thought of seeing it again did things to my heart and guts. I passed the barber's shop, still a barber's, the name was different. A warm, soapy, almondy smell come out the door. Not quite so good as the old smell of bay rum and late. And I take you, the shop, our shop, were 20 yards further down. Ah. An arty looking sign, painted by the same chap as did the one at the George, I shouldn't wonder, hanging out over the pavement. Wendy's tea shop, morning coffee, homemade cakes. A tea shop. I supposed it had been a butcher's or an ironmonger's or anything else except a seedsman's. Would have given me the same kind of jolt. It's absurd because you happen to have been born in a certain house, you should feel that you got rights over it for the rest of your life. But so you do. The place lived up to its name alright. Blue curtains in the window and a cake or two standing about. The kind of cake that's covered with chocolate and there's just one walnut stuck somewhere on the top. I went in. I didn't really want any tea, but I had to see the inside. They definitely turned both the shop and what used to be the parlour into tea rooms. As for the yard at the back, where the dustbin used to stand and Father's little patch of weeds used to grow, they paved it all over and dolled it up with rustic tables and hydrangeas and things. Went through into the parlour. More ghosts. The piano and the texts on the wall, and the two lumpy old red armchairs where Father and Mother used to sit on opposite sides of the fireplace, reading People and the News of the World on Sunday afternoons. They got the place up in an even more antique style than the George, with gate-leg tables and an hammered iron chandelier, and pewter plates hanging up on the wall and whatnot. You notice how dark they always manage to make it in these arty tea rooms? It's part of the antiqueness, I suppose. And instead of an ordinary waitress, there were a young woman in a kind of print wrapper who met me with a sour expression. I asked for tea and she was 10 minutes getting it. You know the kind of tea. China tea, so you could think it's water until you put the milk in it. I was sitting almost exactly where Father's armchair used to stand. I could almost hear his voice reading out a piece, as he used to call it, from the Peoples, about the new flying machine and the chap who was swallowed by a whale or something. It gave me a most peculiar feeling that I was there on false pretences. They could kick me out if they discovered who I was. And simultaneously I had a kind of longing to tell somebody that I'd been born here. I belonged to this house, or rather, what I really felt, the house belonged to me. There were nobody else having tea. The girl in the print wrapper were hanging about by the window. I could see that if I hadn't been there, she'd have been picking her teeth. I bit into one of the slices of cake she brought me. Homemade cakes, you bet they were. Homemade with margarine and egg substitute. In the end I had to speak. I said, "You been in Lower Binfield long?" She started, looked surprised but didn't answer. I tried again. I used to live in Lower Binfield myself a good while ago. Again no answer, or only something I couldn't hear. She gave me a kind of frigid look and then gazed out the window again. I saw who it was. Too much of a lady to go in for back chat with customers. Besides, she probably thought I was trying to get off with her. What was the good of telling her I'd been born in this house? Even if she believed it, it wouldn't interest her. She'd never heard of Samuel Burling, coal and seed merchant. I paid the bill and cleared out. I wandered up to the church. One thing that I've been half afraid of, and half looking forward to, was being recognised by people I used to know. But I needn't have worried. There wasn't a face I knew anywhere in the streets. It seemed as if the old town had got a new population. When I got to the church, I saw where they'd have to have a new cemetery. The churchyard was full to the brim, and half the graves had names on them I didn't know. The names I did know was easy enough to find. I wandered round among the graves. The sexton had just salved the grass, and there was a smell of summer even there. They were all gone, all the older folks I'd known. Gravett the butcher, and Winkle the other seedsman, and True who used to keep the George, and Mrs. Wheeler from the sweet shop. They was all lying there. Shooter and Wetherell were opposite one another, on either side of the path, just as if they were still singing at each other across the aisle. So Wetherell hadn't got his 100 after all. Born in 43 and departed life in 1928. He'd beaten Shooter as usual. Shooter died in 26. What time old Wetherell must have had those last 2 years when there were nobody to sing against him. An old grimmet under a huge marble thing shaped rather like a veal and ham pie, with an iron railing around it, and in the corner an old batch of Simmonses under cheap little crosses. All gone to dust. Old Lodgers with the tobacco-coloured teeth, and Lovegrove with his big brown beard, and Lady Ramplin with the coachman and the tiger, and Harry Barnes' aunt who had a glass eye, and Brewer of the Mill Farm with his wicked old face like something carved out of a nut. Nothing left of any of them, except the slab of stone and God knows what underneath. I found Mother's grave, and Father's beside it. Both of them in pretty good repair. The sexton had kept the grass clipped. Uncle Ezekiel's was a little way away. They'd leveled a lot of the older graves. The old wooden head pieces, the ones that used to look like the end of a breadstick, had all been cleared away. What do you feel when you see your parents' graves after 20 years? I don't know what you ought to feel, but I'll tell you what I did feel. They were nothing. Father and Mother have never faded out of my mind, as if they existed somewhere or other in a kind of eternity. Mother behind the brown teapot, Father with his bald head and a little mealy, and his spectacles and his grey moustache, fixed forever like people in a picture, and yet in some way alive. Those boxes of bones lying on the ground there didn't seem to have anything to do with them. Merely as I stood there I began to wonder what you feel like when you're underground, whether you care much, and how soon you cease to care, when suddenly a heavy shadow swept across me and gave me a bit of a start. I looked over my shoulder. There was only a bombing plane which had flown between me and the sun. The place seemed to be creeping with them. I strolled into the church. Almost the first time since I got back to Lower Binfield. I didn't have the ghostly feeling, or rather, I had a different form. Because nothing had changed. Nothing except that all the people was gone. Even the Essex looked the same dusty, sweetish corpse smell. And by God, the same hole in the window, though, as it were evening, the sun were round the other side. A spot of light went creeping up the aisle. They still got pews, hadn't changed over the chairs. There was our pew, and there was the one in front where Weathers used to bellow again. Against Shooter. Sion, king of the Amorites, and Og, king of the Bashan. The worn stones of the aisle where you could still half read the epitaphs of the blokes who lay beneath them. I squatted down to have a look at the one opposite our pew. I still knew the readable bits of it by heart. Even the patterns they made seemed to have stuck in my memory. Lord knows how often I've read them during the sermons. Here, Fon, gent, of this parish, is just and upright. To his manifold private benevolences he added a diligent, beloved wife Amelia by, issue 7 daughters. I remember how the young S's used to puzzle me as a kid. Used to wonder whether in the old days they pronounced the S's as F's, and if so, why. Oh, and that's the ads about to start, so pause there for a moment. Oh, have a quick swallow of water. It's strange, really. From the moment he sort of decided he was going to, go check out Lower Binfield, they sort of knew what it was going to be like. Knew it was going to be so changed he wouldn't recognise it, and yet, at the same time, the way in which it is changed, it's so haunting, right? So familiar. I don't know if any of you have been back to a place that you've been gone from a long time. Seen a place that used to be home, changed, and foreign to you. It's a strange feeling. And again, George Orwell does a very good job of, of bringing forth that feeling. A sort of strange nostalgia, half familiar, half foreign. The memory of how things was or should be. A strange overlap when they're the same. The strange dissonance when they're not. Gets you a little bit. Time does strange things to people, doesn't it? Makes people strange. Maybe it makes the world strange, and we're the only things left normal, eh? Something about this book really gets to me. It feels so modern in some of its sensibilities, some of the ideas. It feels so relevant, and yet it is almost 100 years old. What, 87, I guess? Maybe a little bit older because I've got about a couple of months, but yeah. Almost a century gone. And still these same ideas, these same feelings. Maybe nothing ever is new, or maybe it's just that people is always the same. There's some comfort in that, really. The same creature going back all this way. A legacy that endures between all of us. Or maybe it's just me getting that, because it's a very me book. And you all think it's a bit strange and you're just putting up with it because of my sultry, soothing tones. Who can say? Anyway, have a drink before the ads end. That's us back. Right, where were we? Used to wonder whether in the old days they pronounced their S's as F's, and if so, why. There was a step behind me. I looked up. A chap in a cassock was standing over me. He was the vicar. But I mean the vicar. Your old Betterson, who'd been vicar in the old days. Not as a matter of fact, ever since I can remember. Since 1904 or thereabouts. I recognised him at once, though his hair were quite white. He didn't recognise me. I was only a fat tripper in a blue suit, doing a bit of sightseeing. He said good evening and promptly started on the usual line of talk. Was I interested in architecture? Remarkable old building this. Foundation goes back to Saxon times and so on and so forth. And soon he was dodging around, showing me the sights, such as they were. Norman arch leaning in the vestry, brass effigy of Sir Roderick Bone, who were killed at the Battle of Newbury. And I followed him with a kind of whipdog air that middle-aged businessmen always have when they're being shown round a church or a picture gallery. Did I tell him that I knew it all already? Did I tell him that I was George Bowling, son of Samuel Bowling? He'd remembered my father even if he didn't remember me. And I'd not only listened to his sermons for 10 years, and gone to his confirmation classes, I even belonged to the Lower Binfield Reading Circle, and had a go at Sesame and Lilies just to please him. No, I didn't. I merely followed him round, making the kind of mumbles you make when somebody tells you this or that is 500 years old. You can't think what the others say except that it doesn't look it. From the moment that I set eyes on him, I decided to let him think I was a stranger. As soon as I decently could, I dropped sixpence in the Church of Spencer's box, and then bunked. But why? Why not make contact now that at last I found somebody I knew? Because the change in his appearance after 20 years had actually frightened me. I suppose you think I mean that he looked older, but he didn't. He looked younger. It suddenly taught me something about the passage of time. I suppose old Betterson would be about 65 now, so when I last saw him he'd have been 45, my own present age. His hair was white now, and the day he buried Mother it was kind of streaky grey, like a shaving brush. And as soon as I saw him, the first thing that struck me was that he looked younger. I thought of him as an old man, and after all he wasn't so very old. As a boy it occurred to me, all people over 40 had seemed to me just worn out old wrecks, so old that there were hardly any difference between them. A man of 45 had seemed to be older than this old dodder at 65 seemed now. And Christ, I was 45 myself. It frightened me. So that's what I look like to chaps of 20, I thought, as I made off between the graves. Just a poor old onk, finished. Well, curious. As a rule, I don't care a darn about my age. Why should I? I'm fat, but I'm strong and healthy. I can do everything I want to do. A rose smells the same to me now as it did when I was 20. Ah, but do I smell the same to the rose? I can answer a girl, might have been 18, came up the churchyard lane. She had to pass within a yard or two of me. I saw the look she gave me, just a tiny momentary look. No, not frightened, not hostile, only kind of wild, remote, like a wild animal when you catch its eye. She'd been born and grown up in those 20 years while I were away from Lower Binfield. All my memories would have been meaningless to her, living in a different world from me, like an animal. I went back to the George. I wanted a drink, but the bar didn't open for another half hour. I hung about for a bit, reading the Sport and the Dramatic of the year before, and presently the fair-haired dame, the one I thought might be a widow, come in. I had a sudden desperate yearning to get off with her. I wanted to show myself there's life in the old dog yet, even if the old dog does have to wear false teeth. After all, I thought, if she's 30 and I'm 45, that's fair enough. I was standing in front of the empty fireplace, making believe to warm my bum, well you do on a summer day. In my blue suit I didn't look so bad, a bit fat no doubt, but distinguished. Man of the world, I could pass for a stockbroker. I put on my toniest accent and said casually, wonderful June weather we're having. A pretty harmless remark, wasn't it? Not in the same class as, haven't I met you somewhere before? It wasn't a success. She didn't answer when he lowered for about half a second the paper she was reading and gave me a look. Would have cracked a window. They were awful. She had one of those blue eyes that go into you like a bullet. In that second I saw how hopelessly I'd got her wrong. She wasn't the kind of widow with dyed hair who likes being taken out to dance halls. She was upper middle class, probably Admiral's daughter. Had been to one of those good schools where they play hockey. I got myself wrong too. New suit or no new suit, I couldn't pass for a stockbroker. Merely looked like a commercial traveller who happened to get hold of a bit of dough. I sneaked off to the private bar to have a pint or two before dinner. The beer wasn't the same. I remember the old beer, the good Thames Valley beer that used to have a bit of taste in it, as it was made out of chalky water. I asked the barmaid, "The Bestman's still got the brewery?" "Bestman's? Oh no, sir, they've gone. Oh, years ago. Long before we came here." "So you're a friendly shop?" I call the older sister type of barmaid. "Fair enough." I paused to drink then. "You good health, Sad?" "Cheers." Then you're thinking of me? There we are, guys. "So you're a friendly sort?" I call the elder sister type of barmaid. 35ish with a mild kind of face. And the fat arms. Oh, fair enough then, aren't they? On the stretch. As is tradition, we do the net before we stand. Not much in the way of great sense, but then we stand in the back. Oh. I appreciate the two of you cooking out for me. Oh, does me some good. But where were we? So you're a friendly sort? What I call the elder sister type of barmaid. 35ish, with a mild kind of face, and the fat arms they developed from working the beer handle. She told me the name of the combine that had taken over the brewery. I could have guessed it from the taste, as a matter of fact. The different bars ran round in a circle with compartments in between. Across in the public bar, two chaps was playing a game of darts. In the jug and bottle there were a chap I couldn't see who occasionally put in a remark in a sepulchral kind of voice. A barmaid leader her fat elbows on the bar and had a talk with me. I ran over the names of the people I used to know, and there wasn't a single one of them that she'd heard of. She said she'd only been in Lower Binfield 5 years. She hadn't even heard of Old True, who used to have the George in the old days. I used to live in Lower Binfield myself, I told her. A good while back it was, before the war. Before the war? Well, no, you don't look that old. See some changes, had to say. Oh, no. See some changes, had to say, said the chap in the jug and bottle. Town's grown, I said. It's the factories, I suppose. Well, of course, they mostly work the factories. There's the gramophone works, and there's the Trufford stockings. Of course, they're making bombs nowadays. Didn't altogether see why it was, of course. She began telling me about the young fellows who worked in Trufford's factory, and sometimes come to the George, and he had told her they were making bombs as well as stockings, the two for some reason. I didn't understand, being easy to combine. Then she told me about the big military aerodrome near Walton, that accounted for the bombing planes I kept seeing. The next moment we started talking about the war, as usual. Funny. You're exactly to escape the thought of the war that I'd come here. But how can you, anyway? It's in the air you breathe. I said it would come in 1941. The chap in the jug and bottle said he reckoned it was a bad job. Barmaid said it gave her the creeps. She said, "It doesn't seem to do much good, does it, after all said and done? And sometimes I lay awake at night and hear one of the great things going over head, and I think to myself, well now, suppose that was to drop a bomb right down on top of me. And all this ARP and Miss Todgers, she's the air warden, tell you it'll be all right if you keep your head and stuff the windows up with newspaper. They say they're going to dig a shelter under the town hall. The way I look at it now, how could you put a gas mask on a baby?" The chap in the jug and bottle said he'd read in the papers that you ought to get into a hot bath till it were all over. The chaps in the public bar overheard this, and there were a bit of byplay on the subject of how many people could get in the same bath, and both of them asked the barmaid if they could share her bath with her. She told them not to get saucy, and then she went up to the other end of the bar and ordered them out a couple of more pints of old and mild. I took a suck of my beer. It was poor stuff. Bitter, they call it. Not the bitter right enough. Too bitter. A kind of sulphurous taste. Chemicals. They say no English hops ever go into beer nowadays. They're all made from chemicals. Chemicals, on the other hand, are made into beer. I found myself thinking about Uncle Ezekiel. He'd have said to beer like this. What he'd have said about ARP and the buckets of sand you're supposed to put the thermite bombs out with. The barmaid come back to my side of the bar and I said, "By the way, who's got the all nowadays?" We always used to call it the all, but the name was Binfield House. For a moment she didn't seem to understand. "The all, sir?" "He means Binfield House," said the chap in the jug and bottle. "Oh, Binfield House. Ooh, I thought you meant the Memorial Hall. It's Dr. Merrill's got Binfield House now." "Dr. Merrill? Oh, yes, sir. He's got more than 60 patients up there, they say." "Patients? They turned it into an hospital or something?" "Oh, well, it's not what you call an ordinary hospital. More of a sanatorium. Mental patients, really. What they call a mental home. A loony bin. After all, what could you expect? That's the end of chapter 2. Have a swallow of water. And I'll stick with my thing. I'm not saying much, but I will pause here for a moment to say that something stood out to me here, and it's that nowadays people in Britain are very sentimental and nostalgic over proper bitter, which they say you can't get anymore. Which a little bit amusing. Part 4, Chapter 3. I crawled out of bed with a bad taste in my mouth and my bones creaking. The fact was that, with a bottle of wine at lunch and another at dinner, and several pints in between, besides a brandy or two, I'd had a bit too much to drink the day before. For several minutes I stood in the middle of the carpet, gazing at nothing in particular, and too done in to make a move. You know that god-awful feeling you get sometimes in the early morning? There's a feeling chiefly in your legs that says to you clearer than any word can do, why the hell do you go on with it? Chuck it up, old chap, stick your head on the gas oven. And I shoved my teeth in and went to the window. A lovely June day again. The sun was just beginning to slant over the roofs and at the house fronts on the other side of the street. The pink geraniums in the window boxes didn't look half bad. They were only about 8:30, and this were on a side street off the marketplace, with quite a crowd of people coming and going. A stream of clerky-looking chaps in dark suits with dispatch cases was hurrying along, all in the same direction, just as if this had been a London suburb and they were scooting for the tube, and the school kids were struggling up towards the marketplace in 2s and 3s. I had the same feeling that I had the day before, when I saw the jungle of red houses that had swallowed the Chamford Hill. Bloody interlopers. 20,000 great crashers who didn't even know my name. And here was all this new life swarming to and fro, and here was I, a poor old fatty with false teeth, watching them from a window and mumbling stuff that nobody wanted to listen to about things that happened 30 and 40 years ago. Christ, I thought. I was wrong to think that I was seeing ghosts. I'm the ghost myself. I'm dead and they're alive. But after breakfast, haddock, grilled kidneys, toasted marmalade and a pot of coffee, I felt better. A frozen dame on breakfast in the dining room. There was a nice summery feeling in the air, and I couldn't get rid of the feeling that in the blue flannel suit of mine I looked just a little bit distinguished. Was it distingué? By God, I thought, if I'm a ghost, I'll be a ghost. I'll walk. I'll haunt the old places. Maybe I can work a bit of black magic on some of these bastards who've stolen my home out from under me. I walked out, but I got no farther than the marketplace when I was pulled up by something I hadn't expected to see. A procession of about 50 school kids were marching down the street in a column of 4s. Quite military they looked, with a grim-looking woman marching alongside them like a sergeant major. Leading 4 was carrying a banner with a red, white and blue border and Britain's Preparing on huge letters. The barber on the corner had come out to his doorstep to have a look at them. I spoke to him. You were a chap with a shiny black hair and a kind of dull face. What are the kids doing? It's this here practice, he said vaguely. This here be kind of practicing like. That's Miss Todger's, that is. I might have guessed it with Miss Todger's. You could see her in her eye. You know the kind of tough old devil with grey hair and kippering face that was put in charge of Girl Guard and detachments, YWCA, hostels and all whatnot. She had on a coat and skirt that somehow looked like a uniform. It gave you a strong impression that she was wearing a sand brown belt. Well, actually she wasn't. I knew her type. Been in the WAACs and the war. Never had a day's fun since. This ARP was jammed though, huh? As the kids swung past, I heard her letting out of them with a real sergeant major yell. Minor girl, lift up your feet, I said. I saw that in the rear. 4 had another banner with a red. Oh no. Monica, lift up your feet. And I saw that in the rear, 4 had another banner with a red, white and blue border. And in the middle, we are ready, are you? What do they want to march them up and down for? I said to the barber. I don't know. Suppose it's kind of propaganda like. I knew, of course. Get the kids warm-minded. Give us all the feeling that there's no way out of it. The bombers are coming as sure as Christmas, so down to the cellar you go and don't argue. 2 of the great black planes from Malton were zooming over the eastern end of the town. Christ, I thought. When it starts, it won't surprise us any more than a shower of rain. Already we're listening for the first bomb. The barber went on to tell me that thanks to Mrs. Todger's efforts, the school kids have been served with their gas masks already. Well, I started to explore the town. 2 days I spent just wandering around the old landmarks, such of them as I could identify. And all that time I never ran across a soul that knew me. I were a ghost, and if I weren't actually invisible, I felt like it. It were queer. Queerer than I can tell you. You ever read a story of H.G. Wells's about a chap who were in two places at once? I say he were really in his own home, but he had kind of a hallucination that he were at the bottom of the sea. He'd be walking around his room, but instead of the tables and chairs, he'd see the water weed, and the great crabs and cuttlefish reaching out to get him. Oh, just like that. For hours on end, I'd be walking through a world that weren't there. I'd count my paces as I went down the pavement and think, yes, here's where so-and-so's fields began. The edge runs across the street and snaps through that house. That petrol pump is really an elm tree. And here's the edge of the allotments. And this street, there were a dismal little row of semi-detached houses, called Cumberland's Road, I remember. It's the lane we used to go with Katie Simmons, and the nut bushes grew on both sides. No doubt I got the distances wrong, but in general directions were right. I don't believe anyone who hadn't happened to be born there would have believed that these streets were fields as little as 20 years ago. It was though the countryside had been buried by a kind of volcanic eruption from the outer suburbs. Nearly the whole of what used to be old Brewer's land had been swallowed up in the council housing estate. The Mills farm had vanished, the cow pond where I caught my first fish had been drained and filled up and built over, so I couldn't even say exactly where it used to stand. They were all houses, little red cubes of houses all alike, with privet edges and asphalt paths leading up to the front door. Beyond the council estate, the town thinned out a bit, but the jerry builders was doing their best. There were little knots of houses dumped down here and there, wherever anybody had been able to buy a plot of land, and makeshift roads leading up to the houses, and empty lots with builders' boards and bits of ruined fields covered with thistles and tin cans. In the centre of the old town, on the other hand, things hadn't changed much so far as the buildings went. A lot of the shops were still doing the same line of trade, although the names was different. Lily White's were still a draper's, but didn't look too prosperous. What used to be Gravit's, the butcher, were now a shop that sold radio parts. Mother Wheeler's little window had been bricked over. Gimlet's was still a grocer, but had been taken over by the International. Gives you an idea of the power of these big combines, that they could even swallow up a cute old skinflint like Grimmer. But from what I know of him, not to mention the slap-up tombstone in the churchyard, I bet he got out while the going was good. Had 10 or 15,000 quid to take to heaven with him. The only shop that was still in the same hands was Saracens, the people who'd ruined Father. They'd swollen to enormous dimensions, and they had another huge branch in the new part of the town. They turned into a kind of general store and sold furniture, drugs, hardware and ironmongery, as well as the old garden stuff. For the best part of 2 days I was wandering round, not actually groaning and rattling chains, but sometimes feeling that I'd like to. Also, I was drinking more than was good for me. Almost as soon as I got to Lower Binfield I started on the booze, and after that the pubs never seemed to open quite early enough. My tongue was hanging out of my mouth for the last half hour before the opening time. Mind you, I wasn't in the same mood all the time. Sometimes it seemed to me it didn't matter a damn if Lower Binfield had been obliterated. After all, what had I come here for except to go away from the family? There was no reason why I shouldn't do all the things I wanted to do, even go fishing if I felt like it. On Saturday afternoon I even went to the fish and tackle shop in the High Street and bought a split cane rod. I was paying for a split cane rod as a boy. It's a little bit dearer than a green art, and hooks and guts and so forth. The atmosphere of the shop cheered me up. Whatever else changes, fishing tackle don't, because of course fish don't change either. The shopman didn't see anything funny in a fat middle-aged man buying a fishing rod. On the contrary, we had a little talk about the fishing in the Thames and the big chub somebody had landed the year before last on a paste made of brown bread, honey and minced boiled rabbit. I didn't tell him what I wanted them for, and I hardly even admitted it to myself, but the strongest salmon trace he'd got, and some number 5 roach hooks with an eye to those big carp at Binfield House, in case they still existed. Most of Sunday morning I was kind of debating it in my mind. Should I go fishing or shouldn't I? One moment I think, why the hell not? And next it would seem to me that it was just one of those things you dream about but don't ever do. In the afternoon I got the car out and drove down the Burford Weir. I thought I'd just have a look at the river, and tomorrow, if the weather were right, maybe I'd take my new fishing rod, and put on the old coat and grey flannel bag I had in my suitcase and have a good day's fishing. 3 or 4 days if I felt like it. I drove over Chamford Hill, down the bottom of the road. I drove over Chamford Hill. Down at the bottom, the road turns off and runs parallel to the towpath. I got out of the car and walked. And not a little red and white bungalows had sprung up beside the road. Might have expected it, of course. There seemed to be a lot of cars standing about. As I got nearer the river, I came into the sound. Yes, plonk, tiddle, tiddle, plonk. Yes, the sound of gramophones. I ran to the band and come in sight of the towpath. Christ, another jolt. The place was black with people. Where the water meadows used to be. Tea houses, penny in the slot machines, sweet kiosks, and chaps selling Moore's ice cream. Might as well have been at Margate. I remember the old towpath. You could walk along it for miles, except for the chaps at the lock gate now and then, and bargemen mooching along behind his oars. You'd meet never a soul. When we went fishing, we always had the place to ourselves. Often I've sat there an whole afternoon, and Aaron might be standing in the shallow water 50 yards up the bank. For 3 or 4 hours on end, there wouldn't be anyone passing to scare him away. Where had I got the idea that grown-up men didn't go fishing? Up and down the bank, as far as I could see in both directions, there were a continuous chain of men fishing, one every 5 yards. Wondered how the hell they could have all got there until it struck me out there must be some fishing club or other. The river crammed with boats, rowing boats, canoes, punts, motor launches, full of young fools with next to nothing on, all of them screaming and shouting, and most of them with a gramophone aboard as well. The floats of the poor devils were trying to fish rocked up and down on the water in the wash of the motorboats. I walked a little way, dirty, chubby water, despite the fine day. Nobody were catching anything, not even minnows. I wondered whether they expected to. A crowd like that would be enough to scare away every fish in creation. Actually, as I watched their floats rocking up and down among the ice cream tubs and the paper bags, I doubt whether there were any fat fish to catch. Are there still fish in the Thames? I suppose there must be. Now, I'll swear the Thames water isn't the same as it used to be. Its colour's quite different. Of course, you think that's merely my imagination, but I tell you it isn't so. I know the water has changed. I remember the Thames water as it used to be, a kind of luminous green that you could see deep into, the shoals of dace crossing around the reeds. You couldn't see 3 inches into the water now. It's all brown and dirty, with a film of oil on it from the motorboats, not to mention the fag ends and the paper bags. After a bit I turned back. Couldn't stick the noise of the gramophones any longer. Of course it's Sunday, I thought. Mightn't be so bad on a weekday. But after all, I knew I'd never come back. God rot 'em, let 'em keep their bloody river. Wherever I go fishing, it won't be in the Thames. The crowd swamped past me. Crowds of bloody aliens, and nearly all of them young. Boys and girls lurking along in couples. A troop of girls come past wearing bell-bottom trousers and white caps. Are the ones that were in the American Navy, with slogans printed on them. One of them, 17 she might have been, had "Please kiss me." I wouldn't have minded. On impulse, I suddenly turned aside and waved myself from one of the penny in the slot machines. There was a clinking noise somewhere inside it. You know those machines that tell your fortune as well as your weight. And a typewritten card comes sliding out. "You are the possessor of exceptional gifts," I read. "But owing to excessive modesty, you have never received your due rewards. Those about you underrate your abilities. You are too fond of standing aside and allowing others to take the credit for what you have done yourself. You are sensitive, affectionate, and always loyal to your friends. You are deeply attractive to the opposite sex. Your worst fault is generosity. Persevere, for you will rise high. Weight, 14 stone, 11 pounds. I put on 4 stones in the last 3 days, I noticed. Must have been the booze. I bought 4 pounds in the last 3 days. I noticed must have been the booze. Oh, I was wondering about that. 4 stone is a lot of weight to put on. Anyway, so that's the end of chapter 3 of part 4. And I have a quick swallow of water and we press immediately on, as is the idea. Part 4, chapter 4. I drove back to the George, dumped the car in the garage and had a late cup of tea. As it was Sunday, the bar wouldn't open for another hour or 2. In the cool of evening, I went out and strolled up in the direction of the church. I was just crossing the marketplace when I noticed a woman walking a little way ahead of me. As soon as I set eyes on her, I had a most peculiar feeling that I'd seen her somewhere before. You know the feeling. I couldn't see her face, of course, and so far as her back view went, there was nothing I could identify. Yet I could have sworn I knew her. She went up the high street and turned down one of the side streets to the right, the one where Uncle Ezekiel used to have his shop. I followed. I don't quite know why. Partly curiosity, perhaps, partly a kind of precaution. My first thought had been that here at last were one of the people I'd known in the old days in Lower Binfield. Almost at the same moment it struck me that it was just as likely she was someone from West Bletchley. In that case I'd have to watch my step, because if he found out I were here she'd probably spill the wound. So I followed cautiously, keeping at a safe distance and examining her back view as well as I could. There was nothing striking about her. She was a tallish, fattish woman, might have been 40 or 50, in a rather shabby black dress. She'd no hat on, as though she'd just shipped out from her house for a moment. The way she walked gave you the impression that her shoes was down at heel. All in all, she looked a bit of a slut. Only there was nothing to identify, only the vague something which I knew. I'd seen before. It was something in her movement, perhaps. Presently she got to a little sweet and paper shop, the kind of little shop that always keeps open on a Sunday. The woman who kept it was standing in the doorway, doing something to her stand of postcards. My woman stepped past stopped to pass the time of day. I stopped too as soon as I could find a shop window which I could pretend to be looking into. There were plumbers and decorators, full of samples of wallpapers and bathroom fittings and things. By this time I wasn't 15 yards away from the other two. I could hear their voices cooing away in one of those meaningless conversations that women have when they're just passing the time of day. Yes, that's just about it. That's just where it is, I said to him myself. I said, well, what else do you expect? I said, don't seem right to you, do it? What's the use? You might as well talk to a stone. It's a shame, and so on and so forth. And I'll get warmer. Obviously my woman was a small shopkeeper's wife, like the other. I was just wondering whether she mightn't be one of the people I'd known in Lower Binford after all, when she turned around almost towards me and I saw 3/4 of her face. And Jesus Christ, it were Elsie. Yes, it were Elsie, no chance of mistake. Elsie, that fat egg. It gave me such a shock. Not mind you seeing Elsie, but seeing what she'd grown to be like. And for a moment things swam in front of my eyes. The brass taps and ball stops and porcelain sinks and things seemed to fade away into the distance, so I both saw them and didn't see them. Also for a moment I were in a deadly funk that she might recognise me. But she looked bang in my face and hadn't made a sign. A moment more and she turned and went on. Again I followed. It was dangerous. She might spot I was following her, and that might start her wondering who I was. But I just had to have another look at her. The fact was that she exercised a kind of horrible fascination on me. The manner of speaking I'd been watching her before, but I watched her with a quite different eye now. You're horrible. Yeah, I got a kind of scientific kick out of studying her back view. It's frightening, the thing that 24 years can do to a woman. Only 24 years, and the girl I'd known with her milky white skin and red mouth and kind of dull gold hair had turned into this great round-shouldered egg, shambling along on twisted heels. Made me feel glamour glad I'm a man. No man ever goes to pieces quite so completely as that. I'm fat, I grant you. I'm the wrong shape, if you like. At least I'm A shape. Elsie wasn't even particularly fat. She was merely shapeless. Ghastly things happened to her hips. As for her waist, it had vanished. She was just a kind of soft, lumpy cylinder, like a bag of meal. I followed her a long way out of the town and through a lot of mean little streets I didn't know. Finally she turned in at the doorway of another shop. By the way she went in, it was obviously her own. I stopped for a moment outside the window. G. Cookson, confectioner and tobacconist. So Elsie was Mrs. Cookson. It remained a mangy little shop, much like the other one where she stopped before, but smaller and a lot more flower-blown. Didn't seem to sell anything except tobacco and the cheapest kind of sweets. I wondered what I could buy that would take a minute or two. When I saw a rack of cheap pipes in the window, I went in. I had to brace my nerve a little before I did it, because there'd need to be some hard lying if by chance she recognised me. She disappeared in the back room of the shop, but she'd come back as I tapped on the counter. She was face to face. No sign. Didn't recognise me. Just looked at me the way they do. You know the way small shopkeepers look at their customers. Utter lack of interest. But the first time I'd seen her full face, and though I half expected what I saw, it gave me almost as big a shock at the first moment I'd recognised her. I suppose when you look at the face of someone young, even of a child, you ought to be able to foresee what it will look like when it's old. It's all a question of the shape of the bones. If it had ever occurred to me when I was 20 and she was 22 to wonder what Elsie would look like at 47, it wouldn't have crossed my mind that she could ever look like that. The old face had kind of sagged, as if it had somehow been drawn downward. You know the type of middle-aged woman that has a face like a bulldog? Great underhung jaws, mouth turned down at the corners, eyes sunken with pouches underneath. It is exactly like a bulldog. And it was the same face. I'd have known it in a million. Her hair wasn't completely grey, it was kind of dirty colour, not much less of it than it used to be. She didn't know me from Adam. I was just a customer, a stranger, an uninterested fat man. It's queer what an inch or two of fat can do. I wondered whether I'd changed even more than she had, or whether it were merely that she wasn't expecting to see me, or whether, or the likeliest of all, she'd simply forgotten my existence. "Good evening," she said, in the listless way they have. "Want a pipe?" I said flatly. "Bra pipe." "Pipe? Now just let me see. I know we got some pipes somewhere. Now where'd I put it? Ah, here we are." She took a cardboard box full of pipes from somewhere under the counter. How bad her accent had got. Maybe they were just imagining that, because my own standards had changed. But no, she used to be so superior. All the girls at Lily White's were so superior. And she'd been a member of the Vicar's Reading Circle. I swear she never used to drop her H's. It's queer how these women go to pieces once they're married. I figured among the parts for a moment and pretended to look them over. Finally I said I'd like one with an amber mouthpiece. "Amber, I don't always regret me." She turned towards the back of the shop and called, "George!" So the other bloke's name was George too. A noise that sounded something like came from the back shop. "George, where'd you put the other box of pipes?" George come in. He was a small, stoutish chap in shirt sleeves with a bald head and a big gingery-coloured soup strainer and moustache. His jaw was working in a ruminative kind of way. Obviously he'd been interrupted in the middle of his tea. The two of them started poking around in search of the other box of pipes. About 5 minutes before they ran them into earth behind some bottles of sweets. It's wonderful the amount of litter they managed to accumulate in these frowsy little shops where the old stock is worth about 50 quid. I watched old Elsie poking about among the litter and mumbling to herself. You know the kind of shuffling round shoulders movements of an older woman who's lost something? No use trying to describe to you what I felt. A kind of cold, deadly, desolate feeling. You can't conceive it unless you've had it. All I can say is, if there were a girl you used to care about 25 years ago, go and have a look at her now. Then perhaps you know what I felt. As a matter of fact, the thought was chiefly in my mind were how differently things turn out from what you expect. The times I had with Elsie. A July night under the chestnut trees. Wouldn't you think it would have had some kind of after effect beyond? Who'd have thought the time would ever come when there would be just no feeling whatever between us? Here was I and here was she. Our bodies might be a yard apart. We was just as much strangers as though we'd never met. As for her, she didn't even recognise me. If I told her who I was, very likely she wouldn't remember. If she did remember, what would she feel? Just nothing. Probably wouldn't even be angry because I'd done the dirty on her. It was as if the old thing had never happened. On the other hand, who'd ever have foreseen that Elsie would end up like this? She'd seemed the kind of girl who's bound to go to the devil. I know there'd been at least one other man before I had her. It's safe to bet there were others between me and the second George. Wouldn't surprise me to learn that she'd had a dozen altogether. I treated her badly, there's no question about that. Many a time it had given me a bad half hour. She'll end up on the streets, I used to think. They stick her head in the gas oven. And sometimes I felt I'd been a bit of a bastard. Other times I reflected, it was true enough. If it hadn't been me, it would have been somebody else. You see the way things happen, the kind of dull, pointless way. How many women really end up on the streets? Damn sight more end up at the mangle. She hasn't gone the bad or the good either. Just ended up like everybody else. A fat old woman muddling about a frowsy little shop, with a gingery moustache George to call her own. Probably got a string of kids as well. Mrs. George Cookson. Lived respected and died lamented, and might die this side of the bankruptcy court if she were lucky. They found the box of pipes. Of course there weren't any with amber mouthpieces among them. I don't know if we got any amber ones just at present, sir. No amber. Got some nice vulcanite ones. I want an amber one, I said. You got some nice pipes there? She had one out. That's a nice pipe now. £50 now, Winnie's. I took it. Our fingers just touched. No kick, no reaction. The body doesn't remember. I suppose you think I bought the pipe just for old sake. Put £50 in Elsie's pocket. But not a bit of it. I didn't want the thing. I didn't smoke a pipe. I'd merely been making a pretext to come into the shop. I turned it into my fingers and then put it down the counter. Don't matter, I'll leave it, I said. Give me a small players. I had to buy something after all the fuss. George II, maybe with a third or fourth, ran out that packet of players, still munching away beneath his moustache. I could see he was sulky because I'd dragged them away from his tea for nothing. It seemed too damn silly to waste £50. I cleared out, and that was the last I ever saw of Elsie. I went back to the George and had dinner. Afterwards I went out, with some vague idea of going to the pictures if they was open. But instead I ended up in one of the big noisy pubs in the new part of town. There I ran into a couple of chaps from Staffordshire who were travelling hard way. We got to talking about the state of trade and playing darts and drinking Guinness. By closing time they was both so boozed I had to take them home in a taxi. And I was a bit under the weather myself, and the next morning I woke up with a worse head than ever. And that's the end of chapter 4 of part 4. And having a quick swallow of water and then press immediately on. Chapter 5. But I had to see the pool at Binfield House. I felt really bad that morning. The fact was that ever since I struck Lord Binfield I've been drinking almost continuously, from every opening time to every closing time. The reason that hadn't occurred to me to this minute was that really there'd be nothing else to do. They were all my trip had amounted to so far, 3 days on the booze. The same as the other mornings, I crawled over to the window and watched the bowler hats and school hats hustling to and fro. My enemies, I thought. The conquering army that sacked the town and covered the ruins with fag ends and paper bags. I wondered why I cared. Do you think, I dare say, that if it had given me a job to find Lower Binfield swollen to a kind of Dagenham, it was merely because I don't like to see the earth getting fuller and country turning into town? But isn't that at all? I don't mind towns growing, so long as they do grow and don't merely spread like gravy over a tablecloth. I know that people have got to have somewhere to live, and that if a factory is in one place, it will be another. As for the picturesqueness, that sad countrified stuff, as oak panels and pewter dishes and copper warming pans and whatnot, it merely gives me the sick. Whatever we were in the old days, we weren't picturesque. Mother would never have seen any sense in antiques that Wendy had filled her house with. She didn't like the gate-leg tables and said they'd caught your legs. As for pewter, she wouldn't have had it in the house. Nasty, greasy stuff, she called it. You say what you like, it was something that we had in those days and haven't got now. Something you probably can't have in a streamlined milk bar with a radio playing. I'd come back to look for it, and I haven't found it. And it's so I half believed in it even now, when I hadn't yet got my teeth in and my belly were crying out for an aspirin and a cup of tea. That started me thinking again about the pool at Binfield House. After seeing what they'd done to the town, I had a feeling you could only describe as a fear about going to see whether the pool still existed. Yet it might. There were no knowing. The town was smothered under red brick. Her house was full of Wendy and her junk. The Thames were poisoned with motor oil and paper bags. Maybe the pool was still there, with the great black fish still cruising round it. Maybe even it was still hidden in the woods, and from that day to this, no one had discovered it existed. It was quite possible. It was a very thick pit of wood, full of brambles and rotten brushwood. The beech trees gave way the works around about there, which made the undergrowth thicker. The kind of place most people don't pay to penetrate. Queerer things have happened. I didn't start out till late afternoon. Must have been about 4:30 when I took the car out and drove onto the upper Binfield Road. Halfway up the hill, the houses thinned out and stopped, and the beech trees began. The road forks about there, and I took the right-hand fork, meaning to make a detour round and come back to Binfield House on the road. And presently I stopped to have a look at the copse I was driving through. The beech trees seemed just the same. Lord, how they were the same. I backed the car into a bit of grass beside the road, under a fall of chalk, and just got out and walked. Just the same. The same stillness, the same great beds of rustling leaves that seemed to go on from year to year without rotting. Not a creature stirring except the small birds in the treetops which you couldn't see. One easy to believe that the great noisy mess of a town were barely 3 miles away. I began to make my way through the little copse in the direction of Binfield House. I could vaguely remember how the path went. And Lord, yes, the same chalk hollow where the black hand went and had catapult shots, and Sid Lovegrove had told us how babies was born. The day I caught my first fish, pretty near 40 years ago. As the trees thinned out again, you could see the other road and the walls of Binfield House. The old rotten wooden fence were gone, of course, and they put up a hard brick wall with spikes on top, such as you'd expect to see round a lonely bin. It puzzled me for some time about how to get into Binfield House, until finally it had struck me. I'd only go to tell them my wife was mad and I was looking for somewhere to put her. After that, they'd be quite ready to show me round the grounds. In my new suit, I probably looked prosperous enough to have a wife in a private asylum. It wasn't until I was actually at the gate that it occurred to me to wonder whether the pool was still inside the grounds. The old grounds of Binfield House had covered 50 acres, I suppose. The grounds of the loony bin weren't likely to be more than 5 or 10. They wouldn't want a great pool of water for the loonies to drown themselves in. The lodge where old lodgers used to live were the same as ever, but the yellow brick wall and the huge iron gate were new. In the glimpse I got through the gates, I wouldn't have known the place. Gravel walks, flower beds, lawns, and a few aimless-looking types wandering about. Loonies, I suppose. I strolled up the road to the right. The pool, the big pool, the one where I used to fish, were a couple of 100 yards behind the house. Might have been 100 yards before I got to the corner of the wall. So the pool were outside the grounds. The trees seemed to have got much thinner. I could hear children's voices. And gosh, there were the pool. I stood for a moment wondering what happened to it. And I saw where it was. All the trees was gone from round its edge. Looked all bare and different. In fact, they looked extraordinarily like the round pond in Kensington Gardens. Kids was playing all around the edges, sailing boats and paddling, and a few other older kids were rushing about in those little canoes where you work by turning the handle. Over to the left, where the old rotten boathouse used to stand among the reeds, there was a sort of pavilion and a sweet kiosk and a huge white notice saying Upper Binfield Model Yacht Club. I looked over to the right. They were all houses. I might as well have been in the outer suburbs. All the woods that used to grow beyond the pool and grew so thick they were like a kind of tropical jungle had been shaved flat. Only a few clumps of trees still standing round the house. They were arty looking houses, another of those sham Tudor colonies like the one I'd seen the first day at the top of Chamford Hill, only more so. What a fool I'd been to imagine these woods were still the same. I saw how it was. We were just one tiny bit of the copse, half a dozen acres perhaps, that hadn't been cut down. It was pure chance that when I walked through it on my way here, Upper Binfield, which had been merely a name in the old days, had grown into a decent-sized town. In fact, it was merely an outlying chunk of Lower Binfield. I wandered up the edges of the pool. The kids were splashing about and making the devil of a noise. There seemed to be swarms of them. The water looked kind of dead, no fish in it now. There were a chap standing watching the kids. There was an oldish chap with a bald head, a few tufts of white hair and pince-nez and a very sunburnt face. There was something vaguely queer about his appearance. He was in shorts and sandals and one of those Ceylonese shirts open at the neck. I noticed, but what really struck me was the look in his eye. He had very blue eyes that kind of twinkled at you from behind his spectacles. I could see that he was one of those old men who's never grown up. They're always either health food cranks or else they have something to do with the Boy Scouts. In either case, they're great ones for nature in the open air. He was looking at me as if he'd like to speak. Upper Binfield's grown a great deal, I said. He twinkled at me. Grown? My dear sir, we never allowed Upper Binfield to grow. We pride ourselves in being a rather exceptional people up here, you know. Just a little colony all of us, we ourselves. No interlopers, he? I mean, compared with before the war, I said. He used to live here as a boy. Oh ha, no doubts. That was before my time, of course. The Upper Binfield estate is something rather special in the way of the building estate, you know. Quite a little world of its own, all designed by young Edward Watkin, the architect. You heard of him, of course. We live in the midst of nature up here. No connection with the town down there. Moved an hand in the right direction of Lower Binfield. The dark satanic meanings, He had a benevolent old chuckle and a way of winkling his face up like a rabbit. I immediately, as though I'd asked him, he began to tell me all about the Upper Binfield estate, and young Edward Watkin, an architect, who had a feeling for the Tudor, and was such a wonderful fellow at finding genuine Elizabethan beams in old farmhouses, and buying them at ridiculous prices. And such an interesting young fellow, quite the life and soul of the nudist parties. He represented a number of times that they were very exceptional people, but he repeated a number of times they were very exceptional people at Upper Binfield. Quite different from Lower Binfield. They were determined to enrich the countryside instead of defiling it. I'm using his own phrase. There weren't any public houses on the estate. They talk of their garden cities, but we call Upper Binfield the woodland city. Nature. I moved an hand at what was left of the trees. The primeval forest brooding around us. Our young people grow up amid surroundings of natural beauty. You're nearly all of us enlightened people, of course, which occurred to the 3/4 of us up here are vegetarians. The local butchers don't like us at all, And some quite eminent people live here. Miss Helena Thurlow, the novelist, you heard of her, of course, and Professor Ward, the psychic research worker. Such a poetic character. He goes wandering out into the woods and the family can find him at meal times. Says he's walking among the fairies. You'll even fairies, I admit to you, that I'm just a wee bit sceptical. His photographs are most convincing. I went to wonder whether he was someone who'd escaped from the Binfield house, but no, he was sane enough, after a fashion. I knew the type. Vegetarianism, simple laugh, poetry, nature worship, rolling the dew before breakfast. I met a few of them years ago in Ealing. He began to show me around the estate. There were nothing left of the woods. They're all houses now. And what houses? You know these faked up Tudor houses with the curly roofs and the buttresses that don't buttress anything? And the rock gardens with concrete berg bars and those red plaster eaves you can buy at the florists. You could see it in your mind's eye, the awful gang of food cranks and spook hunters and the simple laughers with £1,000 a year that lived there. Even the pavements was crazy. I didn't let them take me far. Some of the houses made me wish I'd got an hand grenade in my pocket. I tried to dampen down by asking whether people didn't object to living so near the lunatic asylum, but it didn't have much effect. Finally I stopped and said, "There used to be another pool beside the big one. Can't be far from here." "Another pool? Oh, surely not. I don't think there was ever another pool." "The mayor drained it off," I said. "It was a pretty deep pool. Would leave a big pit behind." For the first time he looked a bit uneasy. He rubbed his nose. "Ah, of course you must understand your life up here in some ways primitive. A simple life, you know. You prefer it so. Being so far from the town is its inconveniences, of course. Some of your sanitary arrangements are not altogether satisfactory. A dusker only cars once a month, I believe." "You mean they've turned the pool into a rubbish dump?" "Well, there is something in the nature of a..." He shied at the word rubbish dump. "You have to dispose of tins and so forth, of course. Or there, behind that clump of trees." We went across there. They left a few trees to hide it, but yes, there it was. It was my pool, all right. They drained the water off. Made a great round hole, like an enormous well, 20 or 30 feet deep. Already it were half full of tin cans. I stood looking at the tin cans. "It's a pity they drained it," I said. "Used to be some big fish in that pool." "Fish? Well, I never heard anything about that. Of course we could hardly have a pool of water here among the houses. Mosquitoes, you know. It was before May 10. "Suppose these houses have been built a good long time," I said. "Oh, 10, 15 years, I think." "I used to know this place before the war," I said. "It was all woods then. Weren't any houses except Binford House. That little bit of copse over there hasn't changed. I walked through that on my way here. That is sacrosanct. We decided never to build in it. It is sacred to the young people. Nature, you know." He twinkled at me, kind of roguish like. "So we're letting in me in a little secret. We call it the Pixie Glen." The Pixie Glen. I got rid of him. Went back to the car and drove down the lower Binfield. The Pixie Glen. And they filled my pool up with tin cans. God rot them and bust them. Say what you like. Call it silly, childish, anything. It'll make you puke sometimes to see what they do in New England. Their bird baths and their plaster gnomes and their pixies and tin cans where the beechwood used to be. Sentimental, you say? Antisocial? I wouldn't prefer trees to men. I say it depends what trees and what men. Not there's anything one can do about it except except wish them the pox in their guts. One thing I thought as I drove down the hill, I'm finished with this notion of getting back to the past. What's the good of trying to revisit the scenes of your boyhood? They don't exist. Come up for air. There isn't any air. The dustbin that we're in reaches all the way up to the stratosphere. All the same, I didn't particularly care. After all, I thought, I've still got 3 days left. I'd have a bit of peace and quiet. Stop bothering about what they'd done the lower Binfield. That's my idea of going fishing, that were off. Of course, fishing indeed, at my age, really. Whoever was right. I dumped the car in the garage of the George and walked into the lounge. It was 6 o'clock. Somebody had switched on the wireless and the news broadcast were beginning. I came through the door just in time to hear the last few words of an SOS. It gave me a bit of a jolt, I admit. The words I heard were his wife, Hilda Bowling, is seriously ill. The next instant, the plummy voice went on, "Here is another SOS. Will Percival shoot, who was just heard of?" I didn't wait to hear any more. I just waited straight on. What made me feel rather proud, when I thought it over afterwards, was that when I heard those words come out of the loudspeaker, I never turned an eyelash. Not even a pause in my step to let anyone know that I was George Bowling, his wife, Hilda Bowling, was seriously ill. The landlord's wife were in the lounge, and she knew my name was Bowling. At any rate, she'd seen it in the register. Otherwise, there were nobody there except a couple of chaps who were staying at the George and who didn't know me from Adam. I kept my head, not a single sign of anyone. I merely walked on into the private bar, which had just opened, and ordered my pint as usual. I had to think it over. By the time I drank about half the pint, I began to get the bearing of the situation. In the first place, Hilda wasn't ill, seriously or otherwise. I knew that. She'd been perfectly well when I come away, and wasn't the time of year for flu or anything of that kind. She was shamming. Why? Obviously, it was just another of her dodges. That's where it was. She got wind somehow, trust it was, although wasn't really at Birmingham. This was just her way of getting me home. Couldn't bear to think of me any longer with that other woman. Because of course she'd take it for granted that I was with a woman. Can't imagine any other motive. And naturally she assumed that I'd come rushing home as soon as I heard she were ill. That's just where you got it wrong, I thought to myself as I finished off the pint. I'm too cute to be caught that way. I remember the dodges she'd pulled before and the extraordinary trouble she'd taken to catch me out. I've even known her when I've been on some journey she was suspicious about and to check it all up with a bar shore, a road map, just to see whether I was telling the truth about my movements. And then there was that time when she followed me all the way to Colchester and suddenly burst in on me at the Temperance Hotel. At the time, unfortunately, she happened to be right. At least she wasn't, but there were circumstances which made it look as if she were. I hadn't the slightest belief that she was ill. In fact, I knew she wasn't, I couldn't say exactly how. I had another pint and things looked better. Of course, there were a row coming when I got home. But there'd have been a row anyway. I got 3 good days ahead of me, I thought. Curiously enough now, the thing I'd come to look for had turned out not to exist. The idea of having a bit of an holiday appealed to me all the more. Being away from home, that was a great thing. Peace, perfect peace, with loved ones far away, as the input said. And suddenly I decided that I would have a woman if I felt like it. It would serve her all right for being so dirty-minded. And besides, where's the sense of being suspected if it isn't true? As the second pint worked its way inside me, the thing began to amuse me. I haven't fallen for it, but it was damned ingenious all the same. I wondered how she'd managed about the SOS. I've no idea what the procedure is. Do you have to have a doctor's certificate, or do you just send your name in? I felt pretty sure it was a Wheeler woman who'd put her up to it. Seemed to me to have the Wheeler touch. All the same, the cheek of it. The length that women will go. Sometimes you can't help kind of admiring them. I pause here to have a swallow of water and I'll press directly on. Oh, that's the end of chapter 5, I should say. I'm pressing directly on. Part 4, chapter 6. After breakfast, I strolled out into the marketplace. It was a lovely morning, kind of cool and still, with a pale yellow light like white wine playing over everything. The fresh smell of the morning was mixed up with the smell of my cigar. There was a zooming noise from behind the house, and suddenly a fleet of great black bombers came whizzing over. I looked at them. They seemed to be bang overhead. Next moment I heard something. At the same moment, if you'd happened to be there, you'd have seen an interesting instance of what I believe is called conditioned reflex. Because what I'd heard, there wasn't any question in the state, was the whistle of a bomb. I hadn't heard such a thing for 20 years, but I didn't need to be told what it were. Without taking any kind of thought, I did the right thing. I flung myself on my face. After all, I'm glad you didn't see me. I suppose it looked dignified. I flattened out on the pavement like a rat when it squeezes under a door. Nobody else had been half as prompt. I acted so quickly that in the split second, while the bomb was whistling down, I even had time to be afraid that it were all a mistake and I'd made a fool of myself for nothing. But the next moment, boom, brrr. A noise like the Day of Judgment, and the noise like a ton of coal falling on a sheep tin, out of fallen bricks. I seemed to kind of melt into the pavement. It just started, I thought. I knew it. Old Hitler didn't wait, just sent his bombers across without warning. It is a peculiar thing. Hearing the echo of that awful, deafening crash, which seemed to freeze me up from top to toe, I had time to think there's something grand about the bursting of a big projectile. What did it sound like? It's hard to say. What you hear is mixed up with what you're frightened of. Mainly it gives you a vision of bursting metal. You seem to see great sheets of iron bursting open. But the peculiar thing is the feeling it gives you of being suddenly shoved up against reality. It's like being woken up by somebody shoving a bucket of water over you. You're suddenly dragged out of your dream by a clang of bursting metal. It's terrible. It's real. There was a sound of screams and yells, and also car brakes being suddenly jammed on. The second bomb, which I was waiting for, didn't fall. I raised my head a little. On every side, people seemed to be rushing around and screaming. A car was skidding diagonally across the road. I could hear a woman's voice shrieking, "The Germans! The Germans!" To the right, I had a vague impression of a man's round white face, rather like a wrinkled paper bag, looking down at me. It was kind of different. "What is it? What's happened? What are they doing?" "Started," I said. "That were a bomb. Lie down." But still the second bomb didn't fall. Another quarter of a minute or so and I raised my head again. Some of the people were still rushing about, others were standing as if they'd been glued to the ground. From somewhere behind the houses, a huge haze of coal dust had risen up, and through it a black jet of smoke was streaming upwards. And I saw an extraordinary sight. At the other end of the marketplace, the R Street rises a little, and down this hill, a herd of pigs was galloping. I saw a huge flood of pig faces. The next moment, of course, I saw what it were. It weren't pigs at all. They were only the school children in their gas masks. I suppose they was bolting for some cellar where they'd been told to take cover in case of air raids. At the back of them I could even make out a taller pig who were probably Miss Dodgers. But I tell you that for a moment they looked exactly like an herd of pigs. I picked myself up and walked across the marketplace. People was calming down already, and quite a little crowd had begun to flock towards the place where the bomb had dropped. Oh yes, you're right, of course. It wasn't a German airplane at all. The war hadn't broken out. It was only an accident. The planes was flying over to do a bit of bombing practice. At any rate, they were carrying bombs, and somebody had put his hand on the lever by mistake. I expect he got a good tickling off for it. At that time, the postmaster had rung up London to ask whether there were a war on, and been told that there wasn't. Everybody had grasped that it were an accident. But there had been a spice of time, something between a minute and 5 minutes, when several thousand people had believed we was at war. A good job it didn't last any longer. Another quarter of an hour and we'd have been lynching our first spy. And the ads is about to come on, so we'll pause there. And have a little drink of water. I was going to say, I don't think that this novel was going to actually get into the Second World War, given that I'm fairly certain it was published beforehand. But yeah. God, that's a major cock-up, isn't it? Accidentally dropping a bomb on a civilian city of your own. God. That'd be a court-martial and a half nowadays, wouldn't it? And deserved, of course. Deserved indeed. Whew. Yeah. But what else is there to say? Well, I don't know, really. I was sort of planning to do a big roundup at the end about the whole thing, but the whole chapter's sort of just on the sort of nature of the past, isn't it? On the moving about of how things change, about the disappointment of nostalgia. The ideas of recapturing a moment that never really existed. Because for all that you can picture them as clearly as ever, none of what you remembers is true in the same way that none of what any of us remember is true. You remember the idealised moments, the good bits, the standouts. People always look the same way in your memory because you only remember one vivid image of them. There's probably not even a single true image, just an amalgamation. And you try and go back and recapture the magic, and you find it's not there. It's never there. It exists only in your memory, a thing that cannot be in the present. That's sad, but there's also a beauty in it. Because it means that even if you can't recapture the magic in the past, or that was in the past and the present, inevitably it'll be there when you look back on it, with time. The worst moment in your life, the saddest part of now, is you look back on and remember fondly. It's kind of beautiful, and kind of horrifying. But yeah, what you going to do about it? Still, oh Lord, imagine dropping a bomb on a town when a country's about to go to war. I wonder if that's a real historical event, or it's just something that was made up for the story. God, the pool being a fucking rubbish dump, that's a bit rough, isn't it? That's a bit rough and all. Still, the ads is almost over, and then the book's not long left to go after this, so I'll swallow a water and we'll press back into it. Yeah, probably a quarter of an hour more, maybe, thereabouts. Right, and we're back, so another quarter of an hour and we've been lynching our first spy. I followed the crowd. The bomber dropped in the little side street off the R Street, the one where Uncle Ezekiel used to have his shop. About 50 yards from where the shop used to be. As I come round the corner, I could hear voices murmuring, ooh, a kind of awed noise, as if there was fighting and getting a big kick out of it. Luckily, I got there a few minutes before the ambulance and the fire engine, and in spite of the 50 people or so that I'd already collected, I saw everything. At first sight, it looked as if the sky had been raining bricks and vegetables. There was cabbage leaves everywhere. The bomb had blown a greengrocer's shop out of existence. The house to the right of it had had part of its roof blown off, and the roof beams was on fire, and the houses round it had been more or less damaged and had their windows smashed. But what everyone else were looking at were the house on the left. This wall, the one that joined the greengrocer's shop, were ripped off neatly, as if someone had done it with a knife. What was extraordinary was that in the upstairs room nothing had been touched. It was just like looking into a doll's house. Chest of drawers, bedroom chairs, faded wallpaper, a bed not yet made, and a jerry under the bed. All exactly as it had been lived in, except the one wall were gone. But the lower rooms had caught the force of the explosion. They were a frightful smashed up mess of bricks, plaster, chair legs, bits of a varnished dresser, rags of a tablecloth, piles of broken plates and chunks of scullery sink. A jar of marmalade had rolled across the floor, leaving a long streak of marmalade behind, and running side by side with it there were a ribbon of blood. In amongst the broken crockery there were lying a leg. Just a leg, the trousers still on. It still had a boot with a wood. It still had a black boot with a wood mill iron. With a wood mill rubber reel. Don't know. It's a brand, I think. This is what the people were oohing and ahhing at. I had a good look at it and took it in. The blood was beginning to get mixed up with the marmalade. When the fire engine arrived, I cleared off to the George to pack my bag. This finishes me with Lord Binfield, I thought. I'm going home. As a matter of fact, I didn't shake the dust off my shoes and leave immediately. One never does. When anything like that happens, people always stand about and discuss it for hours. Not much work done in the old part of Lord Binfield that day. Everyone were too busy talking about the bomb, what it sounded like and what they had thought it when they heard it. The barmaid at the George said it fair gave her a shudders. She said she'd never sleep sound in her bed again. What did you expect? It just showed that with this here bombs you never knew. A woman had bitten off part of her tongue owing to the jump the explosion gave her. It turned out that whereas at our end of the town everyone had imagined it was a German air raid, everyone at the other end had taken it for granted that it was an explosion at the stocking factory. Afterwards, I got this out of the newspaper, the Air Ministry sent a chap to inspect the damage and issued a report saying the effect of the bomb was disappointing. As a matter of fact, it had killed only 3 people, the greengrocer, Perro his name was, and an old couple who lived next door. The woman wasn't much splashed about, and they identified the old man by his boots. They never found any trace of Perro, not even a trouser button to read the burial service over. In the afternoon I paid my bill and booked it. He didn't have much more than £3 left after I paid the bill. Then I had to cut it out of you at the dolled up country hotels. What with drinks and other odds and ends, I've been shying money out about pretty freely. I left my new rod and the rest of the fish and tackle in my bedroom. Let them keep it, no use to me. It was merely £1 that I'd chirked down the drain to teach myself a lesson. I'd learnt the lesson alright. Fat men of 45 can't go fishing. That kind of thing just don't happen any longer. It's just a dream, and there'll be no more fishing this side of a grave. It's funny how things seem to use by degrees. What had I really felt when the bomb exploded? The actual moment, of course, it scared the wits out of me. When I saw the smashed up house and the old man's leg, with the kind of mild kick that you get from seeing a street accident. Disgusting, of course, quite enough to make me fed up with this so-told holiday. They hadn't really made much impression. As I got clear of the outskirts of Lord Binfield and turned the car eastward, it all come back to me. You know how it is when you're in a car alone. There's something either in the edges flying past you or in the throb of the engine that gets you through thoughts running in a certain rhythm. You have the same feeling sometimes when you're in the train. It's a feeling of being able to see things in a better perspective than usual. All kinds of things that I've been doubtful about I felt certain about now. To begin with, I'd come to Lord Binfield with a question in my mind. What's ahead of us? Is the game really up? Can we get back to the life we used to live? Or is it gone forever? Well, I had my answer. The old life's finished. And to go about looking for it is just a waste of time. There's no way back to Lord Binfield. You can't put Jonah back in the whale. I knew. I don't expect you to follow my train of thought. It was a queer thing I'd done by coming here. All those years, Lower Binfield had been tucked away somewhere or other in my mind, a sort of quiet corner that I could step back into when I felt like it. And finally I'd stepped back into it and found that it didn't exist. I chucked a pineapple into my dreams. Unless there should be any mistake, the Royal Air Force had followed up with £500 of TNT. War is coming. 1941, they say. There'll be plenty of broken crockery and little houses ripped open like packing cases. And the guts of the chartered accountant's clerks plastered over the piano that he's been buying on the never never. What does that kind of thing matter anyway? I'll tell you what my stay at Lower Binfield had taught me. And it was this. It's all going to happen. All the things you've got at the back of your mind, the things you're terrified of, the things that you tell yourself are just nightmares are only happening in foreign countries. The bombs, the food queues, the rubber truncheons, the barbed wire, the coloured shirts, the slogans, the enormous faces, the machine guns squirting out of bedroom windows. It's all going to happen. I know it. At any rate, I knew it then. There's no escape. Fight against it if you like, or look the other way and pretend not to notice. And grab your spanner and rush out to do a bit of face smashing along with the others. There's no way out. It's just something that's got to happen. I trod on the gas, and the little old car whizzed up and down the little hills. And the cow and elm fields and trees, the elm trees and fields of wheat rushed past till the engine was pretty near red hot. I felt much the same mood as I felt that day in January when we were coming down the Strand, the day I got my new false teeth. It was as though the power of prophecy had been given me. It seemed to me I could see the whole of England and all the people in it, and all the things that happened to all of them. Sometimes, of course, even then I'll have a doubt or two. The world is very large, and things you notice when you're driving about in a car, and in a way it's very reassuring. Think of the enormous stretch of land you pass over when you cross the corner of a single English country. It's like Siberia, and the fields and beach spinnings and farmhouses and churches and the villages with their little grocery shop, the parish hall and the ducks walking across the green. Surely it's too big to be changed, bound to remain more or less the same. And presently I struck into outer London and followed the Uxbridge Road as far as Southall. Miles and miles of ugly houses, with people living dull, decent lives inside them. And beyond it's London stretching on and on, streets, squares, back alleys, tenements, blocks of flats, pubs, fried fish shops, picture houses, on and on for 20 miles. And all the 8 million people with their little private lives which they don't want to have altered. The bombs aren't made that could smash it out of existence, and the chaos of it, the privateness of those lives. John Smith cutting out the football coupons, Bill Williams swapping stories in the barbers, Mrs. Jones is coming home with the supper beer. 8 million of them. Surely they'll manage somehow, bombs or no bombs, to keep on with the life that they've been used to. Illusion. Baloney. It doesn't matter how many of them there are, they're all for it. The bad times are coming, and the streamlined men are coming too. What's coming afterwards, I don't know. It hardly even interests me. I don't know if there's anything you care about, better say goodbye to it now. Because everything you've ever known is going down, down into the muck with the machine guns rattling all the time. That's the end of chapter 6 of part 4. I'll press right on ahead to chapter 7. When I get back to the suburb, my mood suddenly changed. It suddenly struck me, it hadn't even crossed my mind at that moment, that Hilda might really be ill after all. That's the effect of environment. You see, in Lower Binfield I'd taken it absolutely for granted that she wasn't ill and was merely shamming in order to get me home. But it seemed natural at the time, I don't know why. As I drove in the West Bletchley and the Hesperides estate closed round me like a kind of red brick prison, which is what it is, the ordinary habits of thought come back. I had that kind of Monday morning feeling when everything seems bleak and sensible. I saw what bloody rot it was, this business that I'd wasted the last 5 days on, sneaking off to Lower Binfield to try and recover the past. And then the car coming home, thinking a lot of prophetic baloney about the future. The future? What's the future got to do with chaps like you and me? Holding down our jobs, that's the future. As for Hilda, even when the bombs are dropping, she'll still be thinking about the price of butter. And suddenly I saw what a fool I'd been to think she'd do a thing like that. Of course the SOS wasn't fake. As though she had the imagination, which is plain cold truth. She wasn't shamming at all, she was really ill. And gosh, this moment she might be lying somewhere in ghastly pain, or even dead for all I knew. The thought sent a most horrible pang of fright through me, a sort of dreadful cold feeling in my guts. Always down Ellesmere Road at nearly 40 miles an hour, and instead of taking the car to the lock-up garage as usual, I stopped outside the house and jumped out. So I'm fond of Hilda after all, you say? I don't know what you mean by fond. Are you fond of your own face? Probably not. You can't imagine yourself without it. It's part of you. Well, that's what I felt about Hilda. When things is going well, I can't stick the sight of her. The thought that she might be dead or even in pain sends shivers through me. I fumbled with the key, got the door open, and the familiar smell of old Macintosh hit me. Hilda, I yelled, Hilda! No answer. For a moment I was yelling, Hilda, Hilda, in the utter silence. Some cold sweat started on my backbone. Maybe they carried her away to hospital already. Maybe there was a corpse lying upstairs in the empty house. I started to dash up the stairs, but at the same moment the two kids in their pyjamas came out of the rooms on either side of the landing. They're 8 or 9 o'clock, I suppose, and at any rate the light was just beginning to fail. Lorna hung over the banister. Daddy, oh Daddy, why have you come back today? Mummy said you weren't coming till Friday. Where's your mother? I said. Mummy's out. She went out with Mrs. Wheeler. Why have you come home today, Daddy? And your mother hasn't been ill? No. Who's actually been ill, Daddy? Have you been in Birmingham? Yes. Get out to bed now, you'll be catching cold. Where's our presents, Daddy? What presents? The presents you brought us from Birmingham. You see them in the morning, I said. Oh, Daddy, can we see them tonight? No. Dry up, get back to bed, or I'll wallop the pair of you. So she wasn't ill after all. She had been shamming. And really I hardly knew whether to be glad or sorry. I turned back to the front door, which I'd left open, and there, as large as life, was Hilda, coming up the garden path. I looked at her as she came towards me in the last of the evening light. It was queer to think that less than 3 minutes earlier I'd been in the devil of a stew with her actual cold sweat on my backbone, and I thought she might be dead. Well, she weren't dead, she was just as usual. Old Hilda, with her thin shoulder blades and her anxious face, and the gas bill and the school fees and the Macintoshy smell in the office on Monday. All the bedrock facts that you invariably come back to, the eternal verities as old Porteous calls them. I could see that Hilda wasn't in too good a temper. She darted me a little quick look, like she does sometimes when she's got something on her mind. The kind of look some little thin animal, a weasel for instance, might give you. She didn't seem surprised to see me back, however. Oh, so you're back already, are you? She said. It seemed pretty obvious that I was back, and I didn't answer. She didn't make any move to kiss me. There's nothing for your supper, she went on promptly. That's Hilda all over. Always manages to say something depressing the instant you set foot inside the house. I wasn't expecting you. You'll just have bread and cheese, but I don't think we've got any cheese. I followed her indoors, in the smell of Macintoshes. Went to the sitting room, I shut the door and switched on the light. I went to get my say in first, so I knew it would make things better if I took a strong line from the start. Now, I said, what the bloody hell do you mean by playing that trick on me? She just laid her bag down on top of the radio, and for a moment she looked genuinely surprised. What trick? What do you mean? Send out that SOS. What SOS? What are you talking about, George? Are you trying to tell me that you didn't get them to send out an SOS saying that you were seriously ill? Of course I didn't. How could I? I wasn't ill. What would I do a thing like that for? I began to explain, but almost before I began I saw what had happened. It were all a mistake. I only heard the last few words of the SOS, and obviously it had been some other Hilda Bolin. I suppose there'd be scores of Hilda Bolins if you looked up the name in the directory. Just the kind of dull, stupid mistake that's always happening. Hilda hadn't even shown a little bit of imagination I'd credit her with. The sole interest in the whole affair had been the 5 minutes or so when I thought she was dead. Found I cared after all. But that was over and done with. When I explained, she was watching me, and I could see in her eyes there was trouble of some kind coming. Then she began questioning me in what I might call her third-degree voice, which isn't, as you might expect, angry and nagging, but quiet and kind of watchful. So you heard this SOS in the hotel in Birmingham? Yes, last night on the national broadcast. When did you leave Birmingham then? This morning, of course. I planned out the journey in my mind, just in case there should be any need to lie my way out of it. Left at 10, lunch at Coventry, tea at Bedford. I got it all mucked out. So you thought last night I was seriously ill and you didn't even leave till this morning? I tell you, I didn't think you were ill. When I explained, I thought it was just another of your tricks. Sounded a damn sight more likely. I'm rather surprised you left at all, she said with so much vinegar in her voice. I knew there was something more coming. She went on more quietly. So you left this morning, did you? Yes, I left about 10. I had lunch at Coventry. And how do you account for this? She suddenly shot out at me, and in the same instant she ripped her bag open, took out a piece of paper and held it out as if it had been a forged cheque or something. I felt as if someone had hit me a sock in the wind. I might have known it. She's caught me after all. And there were the evidence, a dossier of this case. I didn't even know what it was, except it was something that proved I'd been off with a woman. All the stuff went out of me. A moment earlier I'd been kind of bullying her, making her be angry because I'd been dragged back from Birmingham for nothing. Now she'd suddenly turned the tables on me. You don't have to tell me what I looked like at that moment, I know. Guilt written all over me in big letters. I know, and I wasn't even guilty. It's a matter of habit. I'm used to being in the wrong. For £100 I couldn't have kept the guilt out of my voice as I answered. What do you mean? What's that thing you got here? You read and you'll see what it is. I took it. You're a letter from what seemed to be a firm of solicitors. It was addressed from the same street as Rowbottom's Hotel, I noticed. Dear Madam, I read, with reference to your letter of the 18th instant, we think there must be some mistake. Rowbottom's Hotel was closed down 2 years ago. It has been converted into a block of offices. No one answering to the description of your husband has been here, possibly. I didn't read any further. Of course, I saw it all in a flash. I've been a little bit too clever and put my foot in it. There was just one faint ray of hope. Young Saunders might have forgotten to post a letter I'd addressed from Rowbottom's, in which case it was just possible I could brazen it out. I would have soon put that on the lids. I put the lids on that idea as well. Well, George, you see what the letter says. The day you left here, I wrote to Rowbottom's Hotel. Oh, just a little note, asking them whether you'd arrived there. You see the answer I got? There isn't even any such place as Rowbottom's Hotel. The same day, the very same post, I got your letter saying you were at the hotel. You had someone to post it for you, I suppose. That was your business in Birmingham. Look here, Hilda, you've got this all wrong. It isn't what you think. Oh, you don't understand. Oh, yes, I do, George. I understand perfectly. But look here, Hilda. Not any use, of course. You're a fair cop. I couldn't even meet her eye. I turned and tried to make for the door. I have to take the car around to the garage, I said. Oh, no, George, you don't get out of it like that. You'll stay here and listen to what I've got to say, please. But damn it, I've got to switch the lights on. Haven't they? Past lighting up time. I don't want us to get fined. At this she let me go, and I went out and I switched the car lights on. When I come back, she was still standing there like a figure of doom, with the 2 letters, mine and the solicitor's, on the table in front of her. I got a little bit of my nerve back and I had another try. Listen, Hilda, you got hold of the wrong end of the stick about this business. I can explain the whole thing. I'm sure you could explain anything, George. The question is whether I'd believe you. You just jumped to conclusions. What made you write to the hotel people anyway? It was Mrs. Wheeler's idea, and a very good idea too, as it turned out. Oh, Mrs. Wheeler, was it? She don't mind letting that blasted woman into our private affairs. She didn't need letting in. It was she who warned me what you were up to this week. Something seemed to tell her, she said. And she was right, you see. She knows all about you, George. She used to have a husband just like you. But Hilda... I looked at her. Her face had gone kind of white under the surface. The way it only does when she thinks of me with another woman. A woman. If only it had been true. And gosh, what I could see ahead of me. You know what it's like. The weeks on end are ghastly nagging and sulking, and the catty remarks after you think pieces with Sam. And the meal's always late, and the kids want to know what it's all about. What really got me down was a kind of mental squalor, a kind of mental atmosphere in which the real reason why I'd gone to Lower Binfield wouldn't even be conceivable. That was what chiefly struck me at the moment. If I'd spent a week explaining to her the why I'd been to Lower Binfield, she'd never understand. And who would understand here in Ellesmere Road? Gosh. I even understand myself. The whole thing seemed to be fading out of my mind. Why had I gone to Lower Binfield? Had I gone there? In this atmosphere it seemed meaningless. Nothing's real on Ellesmere Road, except gas bills, school fields, boiled cabbage in the office on Monday. One more try. But look here, Hilda, I know what you're thinking, but you're absolutely wrong. I swear to you, you're wrong. Oh no, George, if I was wrong, why did you have to tell all those lies? No getting away from that, Torres. I took a pace or 2 up and down. The smell of old Macintoshes was very strong. Why had I run away like that? Why had I bothered about the future and the past? Seeing the future and the past don't matter. Whatever motives I might have had, I could hardly remember them now. The old life in Lower Binfield, the war and the after-war, Hitler, Stalin, bombs, machine guns, food queues, rubber truncheons. It was fading out, all fading out. Nothing remained except the vulgar, low-down row and the smell of old Macintoshes. One last try. Hilda, just listen to me a moment. Look here, you don't know where I've been all this week, do you? I don't want to know where you've been. I know what you've been doing, that's quite enough for me. But dash it, quite useless, of course. She found me, quite useless, of course. She found me guilty, and now she was going to tell me what she thought of me. It might take her a couple of hours. And after that, there was further trouble looming up, because presently it would occur to her to wonder where I got the money for this trip. Then she discovered that I'd been holding out on her about the 17 quid. Really, there was no reason why this row should go on till 3 in the morning. No use playing injured innocence any longer. All I wanted was the line of least resistance. In my mind I ran over the 3 possibilities, which were A. to tell her what I'd really been doing and Sarah could believe me. B. to pull the old gag about losing my memory. And C. to let her go on thinking I were a woman and take my medicine. But damn it, I knew which one it would have to be. That's the end of Coming Up for Air by George Orwell. Let's go somewhere a little bit more comfortable and have a little bit of a chinwag about it, shall we? So, Christ and half, eh? I can sort of see now why this isn't as popular as some of Orwell's other novels. The stuff about fascism is a little bit off-putting, and the way he talks about women at certain points is quite distasteful as well. I can see why it would put people off. I think it sort of goes downhill a little way after the second part of it. I think that's the strongest part of it, but Christ, there is something to it. The fleeting nature of the past, the fleeting nature of happiness, the moments of peace you find where you least expect them. All of it come together, eh? All of it come together and then might fade away as well, I suppose. Quite a sad story, all told. Not entirely hopeless. Strange, really. It ends in a very sort of mundane way, which I suppose is fitting as well, because for all the high thoughts, the ideas, the questions, the fears, the conclusion is pretty sad, pretty much what it says in the tin, really. It doesn't matter. You can think about it and wonder about it and worry about it, but in the end, it doesn't change anything, does it? Lord Almighty. Well, that's about the long and short of it anyhow, so I don't think I've got too much more to say. I thought I'd have more, but I don't know. It's definitely going to stick with me, this book. The writing's very, I find it very readable, and the voice is very much like my own, so I find it comfortable, but yeah. Anyhow, let's read out. Plague's live. I'll just read over the plague. About what I'm going to do. Same as always, do I? Let's not think about that too much. But yeah. I hope you've enjoyed the story and got something out of it, as I always do. You're very welcome, member. I always appreciate your having been here. I hope that, as always, I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, whatever time it should be for all of you. Me, rest my voice never. We'll be back at it again tomorrow with Dora Tuesdays, but I'll take care of it in the meantime. Thank you for looking out for me. Yeah. I hope you will have a lovely rest of your day until the next time I stream, which is, as mentioned, will be tomorrow. Dora Tuesday, special badges, don't forget it. You want to be there. But yeah, that being said, I thank you all for being here. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day, and as always, ta-ra.